What's up, party people, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the upcoming release of World of Warcraft Classic. Today, we've got three huge calls for you all. Firstly, touching on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, being playing vanilla World of Warcraft with Australians. Then we have a long, in-depth call all about Blizzard and their business, as we discuss some of the common misconceptions about the corporate relationship with Activision, and some of the news that's hit recently regarding Bungie and Mike Morhaime. And finally, we finish up with a couple of listeners sharing their stories about how they're enjoying vanilla World of Warcraft and gaming in general while playing with physical impairments. Now, the first two of these calls have up to 4 to 5 people on the line, and the connection with the Discord voice servers does hiccup a few times throughout, with some light echo for a second or two here and there, or people getting cut off in the middle of a word. So I'm asking for just a little bit of patience with these calls. Please be warned that there's robot voice moments, but 95% of it sounds perfect. So no need to let me know about it. I'm all over it, and I've listened through it all already and edited out the unusable parts. But one last point about these calls. The first call you're about to hear does contain a lot of strong language. It's very tongue-in-cheek, but if plenty of F-bombs and the occasional partially bleeped word beginning with a C is going to offend you, or if you're listening with the family around, then please do feel free to skip that call and check in on the other great, more wholesome calls in the show. Consider yourself warned, and no hard feelings if you do skip it. But if you'd like a bit of a laugh, then please do listen on. Now, you all know the drill by now. This is a community-based podcast, so if you like what you're hearing, join the Discord and keep the conversations going with us all over there. Follow the show on social media, and also email me if you'd like to call into the show, make a suggestion, or just say hi. Everything you'll need is in the show notes for each episode. Now, let's get into it with Calling Countdown. Alright, it's time for a Countdown to Classic Australian special call, and I've got a number of listeners on the line for this very, very important call with a bunch of Australian players. Now, one by one, guys, let's all say hello. Cracker Man, how are you, mate?
Good, mate. G'day, everyone.
Hell Beth Carr, what's going on, son?
Usual Australia fun today.
And Seamus, how are you, mate?
Yeah, doing all right. I figure, I better ochre it up as much as I can for the internationals, right?
Yeah, we can thicken up the accent a little bit. And finally, Zanzibar. Sunshine, what's going on, mate?
Fucking earth, it's a cool 40 degrees here, and I'm bloody keen.
Fantastic. Now, thanks so much to everyone for calling in. And look, if people are wondering why I have this rowdy band of Australians in on this call, it's for a very good reason. By the time you hear this call, we're probably just a couple of days away from Australia Day on January 26th. And it's something that comes up a fair bit on the show and sort of around the Discord and on Reddit or the official forums or wherever you might read about World of Warcraft. Many people that play in the US or the EU or wherever in the world you might play seem to have stories about times where you've bumped into Australians. And Australians have a very long-standing love affair with World of Warcraft. And it's something that I really enjoy hearing from people, my fellow countrymen who love the game. And each and every one of you obviously, loves the game. You're involved in the Discord. Let's start with you, Cracker Man. Let's just talk about what is it that you think, is the best part about being Australian and playing World of Warcraft that attracts players around the world to the way in which we approach the game?
Oh, mate, I think one of the best things about being an Aussie and playing World of Warcraft is actually fucking up foreigners in PvP.
Do you let them know about it? Do you let them know you're Aussie somehow?
Mate, we always let them know, don't you worry. We teabag them and...
Do you jump on the forums and go, by the way, I'm an Australian, and I'm playing with 300 MS, so if you're getting ganked by me, you've got issues, mate.
Mate, it was always fun, playing with a ping well in excess of 200, 220 MS and main tanking in a raid with a bunch of Americans. It made you always better than everyone.
Hell, Bethcar, if I can jump to you now and just say, being an Australian, do you find that, getting out and about, do you bump into many Aussies, out in real life that play the game that you get to chat to and share your love for World of Warcraft with?
About the only time that would really happen is when you go to midnight launches, which they dropped off pretty much Wrath of the Lich King, whereby you go to Electronics Boutique and, just have a bunch of other guys there waiting to, get your game and everything like that. That'd be the only real time I'd bump into people, but it was always great.
Now, Seamus, I'll turn to you. And Seamus, you're a little bit of a guest star here because you're an established Aussie journo in the tech industry and touching on gaming as well. And please, by all means, plug away with where people can find you and the podcast that you work on. But coming from the journalistic angle, what do you think is it about World of Warcraft that really drew Aussies to it? And why do people, do you think, enjoy playing with Aussies?
Yeah, I reckon, from that early time, I had a whole bunch of friends who, they were playing lots of other, MMOs at the time as well. And, obviously it is pre and post WoW when it comes to, everything else that existed. But, a bunch of my mates were always clearly like really fighting hard against, such an uphill battle to play anything that was, an online game that had servers based God knows where, that certainly not here. And I think as hard as it was when we all sort of first got into WoW and it was still all US servers, along with everything else that I think WoW did better, I think there was that case of the ping was slightly better and slightly more reliable than some of those other options out there as well. So, I think when people kind of really fell in love with it, I have a lot of mates who then really did connect with, US guilds and things, but, they just kind of locked in with those kind of people in a really positive way. It's hard to say what exactly it was that people loved, but I think, like my memory was that there were those couple of de facto Aussie servers that appeared. And it meant that there were people who kind of felt like they just gelled better with that Aussie attitude. And so you'd get, Americans who wanted to be on those de facto Aussie servers, to hang out with our kind of style of people. And sometimes even that weird thing of shift workers and stuff, right? Where, people in the States who actually found that they'd find more people online at the time they wanted to play because they were syncing up with, with the way the Aussies work. I know we might probably chat about that sort of time zone stuff more later, but, there were so many of those kind of weird little interactions that I think ended up making it work really nicely for Aussies to kind of stand out from the crowd for a whole bunch of reasons.
And have you found through your work that, if you do happen to travel around and deal with, people from the other parts of the world, that whether you're talking tech or whether you're talking gaming in general or whatever, is there like a different attitude when people work out that you're from Australia and the way in which that, we sort of, perceive or comment on or digest those industries?
Yeah, and you know what, actually, it probably is a good match, right, to the way we play, and same with the way often we get a reputation as journos in this sort of geek territory as well, is that we, on one level, we're really friendly, so we don't, there's a lot of other kinds of people who they kind of have that guard up first, whereas I think Aussies quite often will just take that first step. I'm going to assume that we're going to be friends, but also that we don't take any crap. And so we have a great bullshit filter that means that when you are then sort of chatting to somebody about something, you won't just take their word for it. And that's kind of a nice journalist instinct when you just go, no, I'm just going to call you out right now, but I'm going to be friendly about it. I'm not going to be an asshole about it. I'm just going to say it nicely, but you're going to know in no uncertain terms that I'm not going to listen to the crap that you're offering, and I want the real version of what you're talking about. And I reckon that is one of those elements that in, let's say in a guild or in sort of all these kind of other contexts for the way we play with people, I reckon that's a big part of it too, right? That we are friendly, but we don't take crap. And it means you get to the point a lot faster rather than dancing around if there's a problem. Like, let's say you're in the middle of a raid or something. I think we're probably pretty good at just getting to the point of what's going wrong faster rather than people worrying about each other's feelings, but also not just getting the job done.
No, I completely agree. Now, Zanzibar, I'll turn to you because obviously, Seamus has just touched on Aussies being experts in conflict resolution. And as someone yourself who professionally is perhaps about to deal with a bit of conflict resolution, tell me what you think. Do you agree with those points? And also, what's been your general experience playing World of Warcraft as an Aussie?
100% agree. I have plenty of examples from my guild when I was raiding, most recently in Legion, where there'd be, some kind of issue would happen with regards to loot trading, because there was Master Looter turned on. Guildmaster said, look, we're not going to fuck around. If we have assigned you a piece of loot and you decide that you want to trade it to a friend, that's fucking not on, alright? And if you've got an issue, you come and speak to us. 100%. Just come straight up to us. We're not going to fuck around. So I definitely agree with Seamus on that. My experience, playing World of Warcraft as an Aussie is, I love it. I love the reputation we've gathered online, particularly when I go to an American server and I sort of go up and go, rightio, I'm Australian. Let's get this fucking party started. People know exactly how to deal with me, and I know exactly how to deal with them.
Perfect. All right. Well, look, now that we sort of just broadly touched on, why we're Aussies, well, not why we're Aussies, why we love WoW as Aussies. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the main topic that everyone wants to hear about, and that's what was it like playing World of Warcraft as an Australian in terms of the lag factor? Now, I'll start with you, Crackerman, because I'm sure all of you might have a story or two up your sleeve in terms of a PvP moment or a PvE moment where the lag, fucked you right up. But I'll tell you briefly, I remember this very, very clearly, and obviously it's the main thing that comes up all the fucking time when you talk to someone from, Europe or, the US or wherever else in the world they might play. We were the ones that were handicapped the most, it felt like, in terms of playing World of Warcraft and dealing with, as Crackerman mentioned, anywhere north of 200 MS. Fuck, if you had 200 MS, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. I was getting 300 to 350 pretty regularly. Now, some Americans hear that and other people around the world and go, it's unplayable. Like, fuck that. How could you even bother? Well, I've always said, look, it's very playable, and people now experience private servers and they go, so this is what the Aussies got with their 250 MS or whatever. And as you can see, it's incredibly playable. But yeah, I get that if you're a hardcore PvP player, it is going to be a, massive detriment to you and your aspirations. But Crackerman, how did it affect you, and what did you really do to deal with it? Did you get over it, or did it have you, screaming to the heavens all the time?
Oh, mate, listen, if on a good day, it'd be 220 MS, go anywhere up to 300. On private servers at the moment, it averages about 320 MS, and I still play. The one thing that really fucked me up was when my son was streaming YouTube in high definition in his bedroom while I'm trying to raid, and all of a sudden I'd be in the middle of a boss fight and, I'd be tanking, and all of a sudden there'd be a lag spike and I'd be just screaming out, get off the fucking internet! Run into his room, and he's like, there he is streaming shit in HD, while he's not even watching it. And I'm like, no, fuck you, mate. The cable's coming out.
Did he have a sock on the door?
No, it was YouTube, mate. But yeah, look, it's something that I think has, playing on, I played on Frostmourne, aka Lagmourne. It's something that literally made us better players, because especially in a PvP situation, if you're playing with, a lag of, anywhere up to, 200 MS, and, with the spell batching with 400 MS packets, doesn't leave a lot of reaction time to get something through. So we learnt to be very, very quick and fuck up like that.
All right. Well, Helbefkar, let's turn to you now. And you have spoken on the show recently, and by the time you hear this call, I should have published your previous call, all about the fact that you're a rather keen multi-boxer. Now, this is a rather unique take from you in how lag would have affected you, and not just your one character, but perhaps multiple characters. So talk a little bit about your life and lag playing in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing about it was that you can have 3 or 4 instances of the game going, and you really have to play it smart in that if you wanted to do it this way, especially back then too, and we didn't have the greatest internet, we still really don't, but you'd have at least, one instance with decent graphics going. The rest of them would be on absolute basics. You would not see anything in front of you, more or less. It'd be the tiniest, massive pixelations, and, quality is out the window basically. But it became a bit of a fun factor because you really grew as a player, because if you could actually figure out how to move around the world and, still take down bosses and other people with that amount of lag, you became really, really good when you were soloing it and you had, next to no lag at all. And so in my situation, I'd have maybe sometimes about 450 to 500 lag per instance. And it just became unbearable in some case. You had to turn it off because you just couldn't work with it. But I think the biggest fun factor though is that when you actually get later on through the game and you get everyone that's streaming in an area, and especially when Cataclysm hit, I mean, everyone was just in Storm and everything like that. The whole place just lagging like hell. And of course, you ought to stand there going, yeah, this is easy. This is no problem at all.
All right, Seamus, let's turn to you now. And did you have, mornings or would you wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats just screaming, lag? Like, was it the scourge of your very existence playing back in the day?
My most tragic memory was always running down between that section between Gurabashi Arena and down to Booty Bay, just like on, level 40 something character. Anytime I'm trying to run through there, feeling like out of nowhere, some gorilla or ape or something would just gank me, like literally PvE gank, because I didn't know it was there, but somehow it was, and I'd just suddenly find myself dead, and you're like, what the hell is going on? But it just felt like that corridor was one that for some reason lag would just be like, this is where I'm going to make you think that you're still running down this laneway when actually you're 50 meters behind where you think you are, and you're getting beaten up by a gorilla right now. And so that one was always one that freaked me out. But I do also remember getting, I can't remember what the name of it was, but there was some add-on that did used to kind of give an overlay that showed the lag on a spellcasting timer so that you could kind of get ready to cue your next spell. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, I don't know if you guys remember that one, but there was something that
I think it was called Sorry You're Australian.
Yeah, I do remember it.
But yeah, these days it's like, it doesn't matter a damn really, but back then having knowing that half your kind of spellcasting time, that it would just be reminding you, okay, the command has been issued and you can probably now hit the button for the next one. Yeah. And it'll go through.
So Zainzabar, I'll turn back to you, mate. And you mentioned something in your opening address, if I could call it that, about raiding. And we've heard from Seamus with some great points about, even just the nightmares of solo PvE content and how lag affected you there. And that obviously resonated with me because, as a lot of listeners know, I didn't raid back in the day. Very much so a bit of a loner when I played. So I know the hellish price that I had to pay on regular occasions, exactly like he described, of mobs coming from seemingly nowhere and just sending me back to a graveyard because I didn't fucking know they existed. But from the raiding angle, what was it like playing in it sounded like you were a relatively hardcore raider and you're dealing with this rather significant lag that other people might not be. I'm not sure if you were raiding just with Australians or with people from the US. How did it affect you and your endgame prospects?
It was definitely very frustrating. I do recall oftentimes being asked to step out of the raid, because I was lagging. And this was actually, I primarily raided with Australians, but, even the lag I got from, I'm on the South Coast and all the other people in this call are on the East Coast. So the lag in terms of, that is It's not much greater, but the other East Coasters thought they were much better because they weren't lagging as much. So a few times I was asked to step out of the raid, so that we could actually kill the boss, because we would pull and then I would hit a lag spike and die. Wasn't really my fault. But yeah, so it did affect me somewhat, but, overall, just because of general attitude, no one was really offended, if they were asked to step out of the raid, if they had a particularly bad lag spike. I should also mention, I didn't actually raid in vanilla, but this was, in Mr. Pandaria, still before we had Australian servers.
Next thing I kind of want to hit on, guys, is now that, as I say, everyone's very familiar with the nightmare of the lag that we have to deal with, and it's interesting to sort of just to go through everyone one by one and figure out how it affected you. But the other thing that people sort of might be wondering, I know that I'm generally sort of inquisitive about this from time to time as well, is whether when we go from country to country, if certain countries have, a natural gravitation towards certain factions, certain ways in which they play the game, be it PvP versus PvE, just your general attitude towards the game as a nation. Now, there's that concept out there that, Europeans are the PvPers. The private servers start up and they only offer a PvP option because, it seems like that's what they were crazy about back in the day. The Americans, they gravitate more towards PvE, even though, yes, there's a lot of hardcore PvP players over there. As a whole, they tend to gravitate towards PvE, is the common conception about those areas. So my question for us, and again, starting with you, Crackerman, is what do you think our default answers are? I've always thought personally that Australians lean a bit more horde, and also, I don't know about the PvE side of things, but I've always seemed to see a bit more sort of horde related paraphernalia out and about. And when I talk to people on the Discord, I'm hearing a bit more horde this, horde that, as opposed to a few for the alliances. What do you reckon?
Locktar, oh god.
There you go.
Yeah, look, I think it's definitely back in the day, especially on Frostmourne, it was very much a horde dominated server. It wasn't until I think one of the best guilds on the server faction changed over to Alliance in Wrath of the Lich King that it started to migrate over to the Alliance side, and it's still, I think, a bit Alliance dominated now. But Aussies have always sort of been attracted to non-Care Bear servers, so we always played PvP, and we were always horde.
Helbethkar, would you agree with that?
I would to a degree, because realistically, I always found, especially in the early days before they started coupling servers together and merging stuff, you'd find that more than anything, there'd be more horde out there, and it'd just be in abundance. And even when you actually go to groups and everything like that, it'd always be, Locktar guy, as Crackman said, it'd just be, I always been in the back thinking, hey, you guys are more a bit of cunts than anything else. But at the end of the day, I always thought the Alliance was a bit too safe, but I still played it because I just preferred the look and everything.
Seamus, what was your take back in the day on the server that you played on?
I think heaps of Aussies seem to be totally in love with all things horde. I was always more of an explorer, so I played I kind of started Alliance, but I've got characters across, all sorts, everything and experienced the whole world. And, I mean, most of Australia does look like the Barrens, so,
Nailed it.
Pretty much.
That's actually a very fair assessment. If anyone's wondering if you want to take the plunge and do the big trip out to Australia, yeah, most of the country pretty much, you've seen it already in game in the Barrens.
Well, you start in Stormwind, walk any direction, and then you're in the...
Yes, yeah, exactly right. Zanzibar, I'll turn to you. And, in terms of, did you play Horde or, now I'll just say one thing before we get to your answer. Obviously the majority of you are saying that, yeah, Aussies really did seem to go Horde. And as I said, that was my general view as well. And Crackerman added that we seemed to gravitate away from Care Bear servers. I was the exact fucking opposite. I rolled Alliance and I rolled PvE because I'm just that guy. But I must admit, the whole time I played, after rolling that Alliance character and sort of going too deep to turn back, I did somewhat regret it, just in terms of the fact that I could see all my fellow countrymen necessarily, being Horde. And I was like, I wish I was kind of playing with those guys a bit. Did you get that at all, Zanzibar?
Yeah, I did. I actually started off, my very first character I ever rolled was a Tauren Druid, and then the second character I ever rolled was an Undead Priest, I think it was. And I liked the Horde at first, but I think it was Helbethkar, he said he preferred the look of Alliance, and I do too. I'm a big, transmog slut. So I love a character that, isn't rotting through his clothes. So I rolled Alliance afterwards, and I've been Alliance pretty much ever since. But when Classic comes out, I might go, and I'm probably going to swing both ways.
Another big topic that comes up is, these servers, and there's a bit of confusion at times that I see when we see this talked about in the forums about what the deal was with the actual servers in terms of their location or where Aussies played on back in the day and also in the present day. People seem a bit unsure, were there servers physically in Australia when vanilla was around, or when did they come out? And, if there weren't servers physically in Australia, where were they? What ones were we generally signing up for? And as I mentioned to you guys before we started this call, I've had my sort of memory twisted a little bit, not through any sort of fault of anyone's, but just hearing different people's memories from back in the day. And that's again why I'm asking this question, is there is a general sense of confusion about it. Now, I initially could have sworn that I played on what was a US server and had just looked up where the Aussies were gravitating towards, the unofficial Aussie server, and jumped on one. Then I talked to someone a few months ago who was like, no, dude, we had Aussie servers back in the day. They were in Australia. It was all well and good. And then more recently I found out, well, no, hang on, that wasn't necessarily the case. So let's settle the score in terms of the history. Now, Cracker Man, you seem to pipe up quite, passionately about this topic because you seem to remember quite clearly. Let's just settle it. Vanilla, where were the servers?
Servers were on the west coast of the United States, mate. Even though there was a separate tab that said Oceania, the servers were physically located in.
Right. Well, maybe that's the confusion there, because you're saying there was that tab called Oceania. Now, I presume that that's what I was clicking on, what other people were clicking on back in the day, and just presuming that, well, this is an oceanic server. Now, I guess that's a different category altogether. We did have what was purported to be it was still a dedicated oceanic server in terms of this was going to be more convenient to us. So, Helbethka, I'll ask you, did you find that later on, when oceanic servers were introduced in the game, I'm not sure if you were playing around then, that it just, oh my God, it's like, night and day, finally we can play with no lag?
I didn't continue to play on through when they did actually go to an Australian server. I was still playing right up until the point before things actually changed. I do remember that was, rather big news on the actual forums. It was like, Australian servers coming. Yeah, right. Okay. We're still waiting. I thought just through the progression of, those general, internet improvements, who knows, but my lag did decrease anyway. And the gaming experience did get better regardless. Now, they also changed the way in which the game was packeted and everything like that with the new expansions due course. So whether that affected the gameplay at all, I don't really know, but it did progress better. Everything did improve over time, but all those servers absolutely were in the States.
Now, this is for anyone. Who can say with a bit of certainty exactly when those Australian servers were moved to Australia physically? Someone threw out WOD before, pre-WOD, is that right?
Yes, I actually just looked up the news post while everyone was talking. The announcement came out October 23rd, 2014, I believe it was, in which they said, we are pleased to announce that the upcoming deployment of Australian World of Warcraft game servers ahead of the game's next expansions, Warlords of Draenor. This new infrastructure will support Australia and New Zealand and should provide a significant smoother gameplay experience for players. So it was either late 2014 or early 2015, just before Warlords of Draenor launched. The servers were physically placed and activated.
All right. Now, when I play the game, I've recently actually cancelled my subscription, probably one of many people who have been doing that lately. But, in the prior months after Battle of Azeroth came out, I was checking it out and I was noticing that when I jumped on an oceanic server, holy shit, this is what it's like to play World of Warcraft with sub 50 MS. And it fucking blew my mind. I'm going to be very honest with you. Now, Seamus and Zanzibar, I'll turn to you two for the heavy part of this question. And Seamus, I'll start with you. Knowing that we have physical servers for the retail version of the game currently in Australia, are you presuming, and obviously we're all hoping, but are you presuming, or would you put money down on the fact that classic servers will also be physically located in Australia for us?
Oh, geez, man, that's a big one because, well, if everybody wants the most authentic experience possible, then we shouldn't have.
That's a rule. We're going to lag anyway.
That's your no changes call out for everyone. No changes. The Australians should suffer with 350 ms.
Yeah, like or maybe there'll be an add-on to fake yourself 200 extra milliseconds of ping just to get the real
pile on the pain.
Yeah, MBN's already doing that for us anyway.
Now, Zanzibar, I'll ask you, mate. Would you put money on the fact that we're going to get them? And, what would your thoughts be if Classic came out without a physical Australian server?
I have no money in my wallet, but if I did, I would put any amount of money in my wallet that there will be physical servers located in Australia for the launch of Vanilla. If there is not, I'm going to write a very stern letter, not to Mike Morheim, to someone else.
They'd be absolutely stupid not to give Australian servers. I mean, we've already got retail servers here now. They'd be dumb.
How would that letter start? Would that be, Dear Blizzard?
Yes, it would. You are all.
Oi,
Okay. Now, what I want to talk about as well, and just to wrap up this call with this big final topic, is you guys, thankfully brought to my attention one thing you desperately wanted to touch on was obviously a big part of the playing experience back in the day was dealing with different time zones. Now, yeah, we're all Australian and generally people just think it's all good, but Australians consume the game in multiple different ways. You might either, and obviously it's more of a thing for raiding, but hardcore PvP players might go through this as well with on-peak and off-peak times, but you want to play with other people, obviously. It's an MMO. Now, lining up time zones to play with other people is not just a factor of working out how to play with your American friends or your European friends, but we also have different time zones here in Australia as well. You've got Perth -3 hours over there on the West Coast. You've got South Australia and everything. Zanzibar, I'll start with you because, and then Crackerman will get to you as well. Did you guys experience any kind of issues with just being off by an hour or so?
Yes, I did. So already I'm half an hour behind the East Coast because, there's, Australian Central Standard and Australian Central Daylight. South Australia is right in the middle of the country for those of you who don't know. So I'm already half an hour behind. Queensland, for some reason, decides that they don't care about daylight savings. So when daylight savings, October rolls around and everyone sane in the country is rolling their clocks back or forward, can't remember which way it goes. We're all ready to raid at a certain time. The Queenslanders don't show up till an hour later because they haven't done their clocks and they don't care to know what time everyone else is showing up. And Crackerman, and I'm pretty sure it was you who said you're on Queensland. That was a call out, so go ahead and respond if you like.
No, what can I say? Queensland lives in the past. Simply.
You're already down the box and you're just logging in.
It literally, there have been times when, I've rocked up, an hour late. Yeah, for sure. And, it's like, oh yeah, fuck, daylight savings has started down south. We don't hear about it when it starts down south. We don't know. It's not something that the media here in Queensland bothers to tell us. And, we find out when we rock up to raid an hour.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you've aired that because, I've been sitting on that for a while. I'm very big.
Don't worry, Crackerman. I'm a filthy Queenslander as well, and I was playing in Queensland back in the day as well. But as I said, because I wasn't raiding, it wasn't much of an issue. But I'll bear the Queensland cross with you a little bit and say that yes, at times we are a little bit in the Stone Age on that one, on the daylight savings thing. It's fun that daylight savings not only fucks over everyone, but also the avid gamer. Now, Helbethkar, I'll turn to you now, mate. In terms of, perhaps we'll see if you've got any experience in terms of trying to raid with Americans, or if you don't, anyone jump in. What kind of hassles did you go through? We all know that more than likely people were waking up at absurd hours of the morning to try and raid with their American or European friends, perhaps. Anyone got any stories on that? Helbethkar, I'll start with you.
Just before I left, I actually did roll Horde, and with that, I actually did start raiding on their side, just as a bit more involvement, because I was mostly doing multi-boxing on the Alliance side. But I actually had people from all over the world in this particular guild, and you'd be amazed that, you know, I'd be getting woken up I think I was in bed at one point about 1 a.m. My wife comes in, and this is just as the end of Pandaria was coming up, and they had all the heirloom items, and she's like, "Oh, the guild's on now, they're raiding the raid." I was like, "It's 2 a.m. in the morning," or whatever the hell it was. And she was going, yeah, they're getting all the stuff, the final run and everything like that. I was like, "Oh, fucking bunch of cunts. Yeah, right. Okay, I'm up.
And, Seamus, how about you? Did you do anything in terms of, cross-country raiding back in the day?
Look, I actually mostly, was just running world content with buddies, and was lucky enough that most of them were local. I had, a bunch of other mates who were integrated into a US guild. This was a guild that had existed in Dark Age of Camelot before, WoW sort of turned up. So they had these, big international base of players. And so they had incredible scheduling systems to make sure that everybody was available, at the right times, through the week. So I think they'd do, some morning raids and some evening raids and, all kinds of weird slots, to make it work. But, for me, the kind of greatest part of that early phase was, just WoW was so big in that launch that it actually helped my career, because I met a whole bunch of other journalists that, right at a time when I was kind of starting in this kind of space. And it totally meant I made all these kind of cool contacts that meant I was looped in with, a new bunch of mates. I know some people for a while called it the new golf, because people were, just everybody would be able to say, we'll hook up and we'll run a dungeon together in WoW and just hang out and, get to know each other. And I think that was kind of the really big thing that actually worked out for me and helped me to establish myself within my industry.
Now, I'll open this one to the floor. Does anyone else have anything to add in terms of, did anyone wake up at absurd hours to do anything in particular in game, or make a particularly good friend who happened to play in the US and you would try to sort of, level with them or anything like that?
I did, yeah. When you and I chatted about this another time, Josh. I used to roleplay, and there were no Australian roleplay servers, so I had to roleplay on the North American servers, on Worm Resticord, in particular. I had to wake up one day at about 2 a.m. I think it was a bit later than that. I think it was about 3 a.m. because if it was 2 a.m. I would have stayed awake. To go to a guild event, a guild roleplay event. And they were, it went all day for them. But for me, it started about 3 a.m. I got off about 4 hours later, went to bed. It was still going. So when I got back on, I woke up about, 2 p.m. or something. I got back on, and they were still going, and I played again for about another 3 hours as the event was.
All right.
You actually, you totally just reminded me that I have some, I can't even remember his name, but I have like a night elf sitting on some service, on an RP server somewhere that I used for a while, and then he has probably been ignored for most of 15 years now. I have to go find.
Sure, we all have someone on Moon Guard.
Yeah, hanging out in the Goldshire Inn.
All right, guys. Well, look, thank you so much to all of you for being on this call. I'm so glad that we could organise this, and, happy Australia Day to all of you. One thing I do want to do before we go now, Seamus, please don't be shy. Throw out a shameless plug for where people can find you on your work online.
Awesome. Thank you. I didn't want to just, it would have been utterly gratuitous to slide it in anywhere else. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Seamus, Seamus. And I now have a podcast called The Scrapyard, which is about all kinds of Blizzard games, but from a very Aussie perspective, and my website, biteside.com.
Fantastic. And obviously the rest of you, everyone can find you on the Countdown to Classic Discord. Does anyone have, I should ask, does anyone have anything else they want to shout out while you've got the audience?
Oh, Mike, my own self-show.
Go for it.
Helbefka is actually my night elf name, which I've always run with because that was my very first tune and everything like that back in vanilla. Moving forward, because when we actually did have that before BattleNet came, my login name was Galgamir. Now, moving forward, I'm actually going to start some podcasting and some actual YouTube web series and everything like that based around World of Warcraft. So just a bit of a lean in there. It's coming later in the year. I'm working heavily on it right now. So, just keep an eye on the name for Galgamir.
Absolutely, mate. And please be sure to reach out to me again when you start to do that. And I'm more than happy to give you a big plug there and see if we can get you some traffic. So thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Look, for calling in, I should say. And we hope to talk to you all in the future. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This week on my other podcast, The Cinephiles, we covered 1993's Demolition Man.
So we can get to the freezing sequence, or as I like to call Stallone playing Hide the Dick, as he's trying to do Newt Twister in that petri dish going, nope, can't quite see my dick.
That's what I mean. Like, he must have taken tucking lessons from RuPaul. Like, honestly. he tucked it very well.
If you'd like to hear more from the Cinephiles, then please do log on to cinephiles.com. That's SINNERFILES. Or search for the Cinephiles on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. But now, let's get back to Countdown. Okay, it's time for another Countdown to Classic listener call, and I'm very excited for this one. I've got a bunch of Countdown to Classic listeners on the line, and not just any old listeners. These guys are absolutely suited for this topic. Today we are talking about the corporate structure of Blizzard, and there's been a lot of chatter online lately with some of the news that's been coming out about what is happening with Activision Blizzard. And there's a lot of misconceptions being held out there, obviously, which I completely understand. It's not, the average gamer's interest really to understand how the sort of ins and outs of Blizzard or Activision should work on the corporate basis. But we've got three people here today who are going to help dispel some of these commonly held misconceptions about the relationship between Activision and Blizzard, how, share prices are affected, or how Blizzard or Activision Blizzard, I should say, has a responsibility to shareholders, talking about the Bungie split and what that could mean for Activision Blizzard going forward, Mike Morhaim's recent departure, corporate cost cutting. We're going through it all. So anything and everything corporate. This call is going to answer hopefully a lot of questions for all of you. And I just want to start introducing my guests. And please do say a big hello, Aaron.
Hi everyone, great to be here.
And Gleb.
Hey everyone.
And Hobo the Bunny. So Hobo Death Bunny, is that right?
Yeah, it's Hobo Death Bunny. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, mate. Thanks so much for coming on. Now look, what we're going to do real quick, just so people realize that you three are the best people for this call. Very, very quickly, one by one, I'm going to ask you all to sort of summarize a little bit of your backgrounds in terms of work experience and interests, and whether or not you guys are, pretty, heavy investors and in your understanding of the market and whatnot. A few of you mentioned that you've worked, lightly in mergers and acquisitions before and dealing with IPOs and overseeing the kind of share trading that takes place when large mergers or acquisitions take place. So I'm really, really interested to know a little bit about, what you do. So Aaron, let's start with you. What's your area of expertise?
Hey, so I'm an economist, originally from Wales, but now I live in England. And for a number of years, I worked for a small consultancy where we would advise investors and our clients about acquiring new infrastructure assets. So this is infrastructure as in kind of roads and railways and airports, not IT infrastructure. So we would look at what those assets might be able to deliver in terms of revenue for our clients, but also what risks there might be, what unexpected costs might be coming around the corner. And while I was working for that consultancy, we were actually acquired by a big American multinational. So I kind of lived through a bit of a takeover, a bit of a clash of culture, a transition period. And now I work for a utility company where there's a big focus in the UK at the moment about corporate governance and balancing the needs of shareholders and customers. One of the main things I do there is to do with the prices that we charge, but there's a lot of focus, as I said, at the moment on how we balance different interests of shareholders. And there's we're reforming the company. There's structural change happening. There's been new board members appointed, more independent board members, and I think that's actually something that might be relevant for the discussion today.
Absolutely. And Gleb, let's hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So I spent a couple of years working at a large healthcare company here in the States, and while I worked there, one of the roles I took on, we actually acquired a pretty small startup. It was about 25 people, and I was doing some of the tech background work and just risk assessment for that, so I got to see the inner thinking of executives when they're acquiring a company. And the company I was at was actually of over 100,000 people, so it was a huge scale, and we had to work very delicately to try and preserve their corporate culture without putting too much of our magic on them and ruining, the special stuff that they were doing. And then for the past few months, I actually moved over to an investment bank where I've been working in some of the back office functions. So thankfully I do have time to play WoW, because the guys who are working on those merger and acquisitions, they're putting in a lot of time and they don't get to do this kind of fun stuff.
Great. Well, I'm glad you still get the time to play the game. Obviously some heavy stuff going on there at work. And finally, Hobo Death Bunny, let's hear a little bit about you, mate.
Yeah, so currently I work in compensation consulting, located around Boston, and basically not many people know what that is, but we really hone down and narrow and own everything compensation related and recommend companies on those practices. But specifically with this, I do work with a lot of private IPO companies, and then I have dealt with a few M&A merger and acquisitions, and I also have experience on my own side with the company I currently work for was acquired by a major international player about 14 years ago. I was there when it happened, but I do have experience with culture shift and integration on that standpoint too. So yeah.
Thanks so much for those intros, guys. I really do appreciate it. Look, it's quite obvious now. I don't think anyone's really going to question whether or not you're the right people for this call. It's pretty obvious to me. And what I wanted to do, first of all, is just a very, very quick synopsis of the history of Blizzard corporately, and obviously how they came to be this leviathan that is Activision Blizzard. A lot of people do know the story, but just to hit, the greatest hits for you, if you're not aware, Blizzard, obviously originally founded as Silicon and Synapse by Mike Morhaime, Alan Adham, and Frank Pierce, February 8, 91. They were renamed Blizzard in 94 by the time that Warcraft Orcs and Humans came out. Ownership was passed around a fair bit until Vivendi eventually bought the group that owned Blizzard in 98, and then Vivendi eventually obviously merged with Activision in 2008 and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but in what I've read was a $1.8 billion stock swap, and you guys would know more about how that works. That's a little bit alien to me in terms of stock swap. But anyway, Vivendi remained as the majority shareholder with 52% of the stock. And eventually over the years, Vivendi sold off that stock, with much of it being bought up by Activision Blizzard. And over the next few years, basically Vivendi's interest decreased, and they were completely gone by 2016. Bobby Kotick, who was the CEO of Activision, was named as CEO and president of Activision Blizzard when they became an entity in 2008, and Brian Kelly was the chairman. And I read this. You guys can comment at some stage if you think this is high or low or weird or wrong. It raised my eyebrows that between the two of those guys, apparently at one stage, maybe even now still, I'm not sure, they had a 24% stake in the company just between the two of them, which I went like, holy shit. Just anyone jump in. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I do it on a daily basis. So with a private company going public, you want to look at ownership of the company. That is very high.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that's still the case. I can actually look that up.
No, I don't think it's still the case, but I think at one stage that might have been it. Sorry, someone was about to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not sure what it is at present, but that is fairly high. But a lot of times if companies are struggling, and I know I was reading when Bobby and Brian bought the company, they weren't doing that great. And if they're big believers, they will buy up a lot and hope that they can really renovate it and get a huge sum of money from the stock going up, sort of repurchase of their own. So given that they bought the company when it was at its low point, it wouldn't be completely out of the ballpark for them to have such a large amount of ownership at some point.
Okay, fair enough. Now, a few stats just quickly as we get into the meat of this conversation. Now, as of 2017, just from that reporting year, a few numbers on Activision Blizzard's end were they had $18.668 billion worth of assets. Their revenue came in at $7.017 billion. And here's the interesting point that grabs me. And again, I'm going to preface this for all the listeners. I am the least financially minded person person in the world. I'm completely, you know how they sort of say people, you're either maybe a bit on the creative side or a bit more on the maths and science side. Like, I'm a lawyer. I write as well a bit on the sides. Obviously, you've heard the show. I like to get a bit creative at times. When it comes to crunching numbers and just talking business in general, I fall into a heap and want to cry. So that's why I'm so glad you guys are here. But this one grabbed my attention when the reported net income of Activision Blizzard in 2017 was $274 million. Now, obviously net income, after all is said and done, that's what they've taken home as a company. But people talk often in terms of total revenue and the billions and billions of dollars that these companies are making, these greedy corporate figures. Oh my God, they're swimming in billions. But then you look at that net income and it's I know it's a lot of money, but it's a relatively lower figure than the billions with a B that we heard about earlier. What do you guys have to say about that sort of final take home of Activision Blizzard and how that works in relation to what maybe other industries enjoy if you're a top 5 figure?
So one thing that, Josh, you may not get as much exposure to it being in Australia, but 2017 was a weird year around financially with incomes, because with the Trump tax cuts actually that happened in the fourth quarter of the 2017, it really threw off a lot of companies' financials as they absorbed a bigger hit for repatriating money and a few other reasons. So 2017 is a little weird year all around.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to deal with that. A bunch of companies came to us needing to restructure their programs because they're all based on income. So yeah, the numbers don't really hold true for that year because of that.
I think the devil's always in the detail. You can have big headlines, but once you dig down to what's actually going on, then you get a better idea of the state of a company. The company I work for now has a similar number of employees to Blizzard, but our revenues, our headline revenue number is a lot lower. It's about £1 billion a year. But that's not really the interesting thing. The interesting thing is what's going on beneath those headlines.
We're going to get into the crux of the arguments here, guys, and I just wanted to start with this one. Let's go through it one by one. We'll just shout out if anyone is. Are any of you investors in Activision Blizzard?
I'm not.
I'm not either.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Okay, fantastic. I just thought we'd fly that flag just so everyone knew, just in case anyone thought like, oh, this guy's just saying how good they are because he's invested in them. So good. We've got that out of the way. So now there's a relative sense of independence here. So that's good. Now, let's start with this one, guys. And Aaron, I might start with you. And for the listeners' benefit, this is pretty much going to be a chat amongst the three of you, and I'm just going to jump in and direct traffic where I can, and I've got some questions lined up for you guys. But Aaron, let's kick off with you. Now, that merger that happened in 2008 between Blizzard and, or should I say Vivendi and Activision, and obviously involving Blizzard, what did that mean corporately for Blizzard in terms of it's just a merger as opposed to an acquisition?
I think based on my own experience, the day after that merger happened on the ground in Blizzard offices, probably nothing would have changed. They might have had a couple of corporate emails come flying in from head office somewhere. But it takes a long time to change big organizations. And I think the effects will be slow to materialize. And I think we've seen that over time. Things have changed perhaps gradually at Blizzard, but I don't think the immediate effect in 2008 would have been huge.
Yeah, I agree there. The immediate corporate structure and your day-to-day just isn't going to change much, especially for low-level people. It's just not going to change even a year after.
Yeah, I think they both hit the nail on the head. Day-to-day, really won't see many differences aside. Maybe the possibly quickest things that they would see would be staffing cuts just to save money due to redundancies. You don't need 100 accountants in each company. If you had 100 accountants in each company, you don't need 200 to cover them both. You could go down to 150. So layoffs would potentially be the only difference. But in terms of culture, it does take a few years for that kind of stuff.
And I think with even layoffs on that scale, it still takes a while to kind of get the team together to make that integration process happen.
Well, one of the key points that a few of you all of you pretty much have just raised there that really grabbed me is the thought that corporate change or corporate culture can take quite some time to develop. And do you think now, with what's been happening over the last, say, 12 to 18 months, and I know it's been 10 years since the merger, But do you think that now we are starting to see that, yes, if this corporate entity is obviously going to be moving forward, you can see what the perhaps original plan was finally starting to come to fruition?
I'm going to sit on the fence, I think, for that. Possibly, but also, Blizzard has been very successful since then, and they've grown. And I think some of the things that we're seeing kind of happening at the moment, the way that perhaps the company is changing, that might have happened anyway, without necessarily this merger. I think some of the things that they're reacting to are just almost market forces. They've become bigger. After 2008, they had was Wrath of the Lich King, which was the most popular expansion. They've got for World of Warcraft, so they've got bigger, and I'm not sure it's perhaps a grand plan, but maybe that's an element as well. It's just a victim of their own success, perhaps.
Yeah, I align more with that. Just thinking about it more as a natural evolution of a partnership rather than Activision having this plan for them. I think they're more evolved together in that aspect.
Yeah, and also you've seen companies, not only Blizzard, I mean, they've gotten a lot of flack for selling mounts, selling pets for cash, adding loot boxes in their other games, but it's really a trend around the entire industry. It's not only Activision Blizzard that's doing this kind of stuff, and to stay competitive with your revenues, your income, they can't just sit out on that.
It's massively competitive out there. Shareholders are expecting a return because it's so competitive. These companies have got to move quickly, and if things are, if the rest of the industry is going a certain way and it seems to be working, it's hard to resist.
Well, I definitely want to touch on all that stuff very, very soon. And I'm tempted to dive in now, but I'll just holster it for a second because I just want to get this one last thing out of the way, because when we talk about the relationship between Activision and Blizzard, and obviously they're sitting there under that one, name, it's Activision Blizzard. It's not Blizzard and Activision, it's Activision Blizzard. It's the same thing. But people often talk about, and you see this from Blizzard employees, obviously, if they do feel the need to comment, they'll say, look, people don't realize we're our own thing. We're together in name, but we're independent by nature. They don't affect us. We don't affect them. We just, we live in harmony, but we have our own exercises. So my question for you guys is the corporate structure and sort of who reports to who. And we're going to go deeper on the relationship soon in terms of, if someone snaps their fingers, does the other party react to that call, if you will? Or if someone says jump, they say how high. But just before we get to that, is it the case that Blizzard's corporate structure would have, and you said the day-to-day operations and for, regular employees, nothing would have changed, but the actual framework and the setup of the company in terms of, presidents, management, blah, 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 would that have all stayed the same? And do you believe that very much so, yes, there is a great deal of independence despite the fact that they are merged in name? Aaron, I'll start with you.
I think that's quite a broad question, so I'll pick up some parts and let the others jump in when they want to. But for the way the kind of the group structure is set up, the company I work for at the moment is part of a group, and there's we have our own board, but the group also has a board, and the kind of interaction between companies within the group. For my company, where I work at the moment, there's very limited interaction. I think that's partly the way that we're regulated. We're quite hands off because we're a monopoly business, so we're heavily regulated, and we've got to be very careful about how we interact with our group companies. But it's very much where we do our thing, they do their thing. And when I was a consultant and we were acquired by the parent company, for a long time after that, we continued to do the work that we were doing with our existing clients. We were working, going for new work under our existing brand. I think gradually over time that fell away a little bit. But the way that the group was structured was that, we're owned by the same owner, but we're doing our thing, and other parts of the group are doing their thing the same way that Activision are doing their own games, Blizzard doing their own games. They're owned by Activision Blizzard. That's almost kind of that's the top of the pyramid. That's the spider in the web pulling the strings, perhaps, is a way to think about it.
Yeah, I can completely relate with that. I know when I was involved with the one acquisition I did before for the healthcare company, when we very first acquired the company, we wanted to really let them operate completely independently, because we saw what they achieved with such a small group of agile people is really incredible, and what big companies get dragged down in the corporate stuff that they need to go through and all the levels, that can really be hurtful to a company when it's so small. So we really let them run their own business. We didn't even change their emails to our company's email. We didn't change their website at all. Really let them do everything when I was there, and it was kind of, pushing and nudging them to start involving our products in their suite of offerings and make sure that they can still do what they were so successful at without getting any, I don't want to call it like a virus or anything, but really the plague of a big corporation to bog them down.
Yeah, I definitely had a similar experience too. We're slowly getting integrated there, but one thing I forgot to mention is that we specifically do work with Blizzard. And I have access to their files, and I tried not to look at them because I'd probably spill their beans. But when I first went in the files, I was expecting the files kind of to be centered around Activision and Blizzard, but Blizzard actually, was contracted to us by just Blizzard itself. So it's the separate entity. And I looked at their pay structures in their most recent, released public, proxy, and Morhaim's salary and all his comp programs in 2017 were pretty much all Blizzard related. And it just points me in the direction that Blizzard itself is a pretty separate entity, to Activision, but they're all under the same umbrella. So I think most people might not realize that they do have a lot more autonomy than they think.
If we can just stick with you just on that one, because I do remember you mentioning this in the chat that we had prior to this call, and obviously this piqued my interest massively. But without getting you fired or getting in trouble or anything, can you tell us with the access that you've had and with the working relationship that you've had with your employer, obviously dealing with Blizzard as well, what's been some of the more interesting or surprising things that you may have come to learn about them and their business through your work?
Yeah, so I am not on the account. I know the person that is, and I talked to him for a little bit, but one thing I can share is they're just a normal corporation. I kind of expected to walk into it just kind of with rose-tinted glasses and expecting them to kind of have just a different way of doing things, and just not the case. I mean, they're just like any other company that they want to retain high talent, they want to develop a good product, and they want to make a lot of money.
Okay. Now, this is for anyone who wants to jump in, because I want a definitive, well, I don't know, it might be hard to say, but a ladder here. Like, obviously we've got shareholders at the top, and later on we're going to get into fiduciary responsibility and sort of the legalities behind what Blizzard owes its shareholders and whatnot. But tell me if I'm wrong, but I'd put shareholders at the top effectively as this kind of, ghost that lords over everything that everyone, on the corporate ladder has to kind of answer to in a way, if you will. And then below the shareholders, I've got Bobby Kotick. And then from there down, like who wants to be able to, who can give me a little bit of a top 4 or 5 of who answers to who in terms of, if Bobby Kotick, as I said, if he walks into the offices at Blizzard and says, let's say back in the day when Mike Morhaime was there, and obviously says, "Hey Mike, jump," and he says, "How high?" Is that how it goes, or is it a little bit different than that?
So internally, that is what it is like, but oftentimes, especially in a public corporation, the people that Bobby Kotick is kind of responsible to and the people that could put an axe over his head is the board of directors. And I know that we were planning to talk about that a bit later on, but just to give everyone a brief understanding of what the board of directors is, it's a group of people who don't directly have any involvement in the day-to-day of the company, but they're there to really try and have the vision of the shareholders in mind and try and ensure profits, and they often try and set the company's vision, the philosophy, and the strategy going forward. And Bobby Kotick is actually on the board of directors, and that's not uncommon. Oftentimes the CEO will be there, but that is who's giving a lot of the decisions for him. And I'm not sure, someone mentioned before, I think it was Aaron, that when your company was acquired, they maintained a separate board of directors. On Blizzard's website, when I was looking through their board, it doesn't mention anything specifically about Blizzard having their own. So it looks like they may be being held to account by the Activision Blizzard board of directors, which oddly enough has no one who's a former Blizzard employee on it. It's 2 of the old Activision guys. It's Bobby Kotick and Brian Kelly. and then a bunch of outsiders, which means people that don't have any experience within Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, I was actually looking at that earlier, but yeah, Brian Kelly is the chairman of the board and actually has kind of final say on a lot of the decision making. And funnily enough, pretty much no one else on the board has any professional video game experience in the industry. Few PE firms. I think someone worked for the Avon beauty products. So that was a little interesting to know.
Yeah, I was looking at that. It's a lot of bankers and then people just in different entertainment, like Warner Brothers, one of the guys that was helping lead LA get the Olympics in 2028. So they have a pretty diverse board, which is good in the sense that it brings a lot of fresh insight and outside perspective, but it's also a little not the best if it's people that don't fully understand the industry where it's going. They may just be reading in the news a lot of companies raking in money with different loot boxes or stuff like that. So they say, hey, why aren't we taking full advantage of that? And then that's how the stuff sometimes ends up trickling down.
Yeah, it's a little disheartening. These people could be big video game fans and players themselves, but when you see that, it kind of just led to the belief that they're kind of just focused on the profit and loss of the company and not so much the quality of the games.
One last thing I wanted to add is when we're looking at the corporate management that goes the level below Bobby Kotick, so he's the CEO, and then you have the other members of the C-suite who go into it. When I was checking the Activision Blizzard website, one very unique thing I found is that they have a CEO specifically for King Digital, which is an acquisition they made, I think, 2 to 3 years ago, and they have a lot of the mobile games, Candy Crush, I believe, but they don't have a CEO specifically for their Blizzard component.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Josh, about them being Blizzard is a separate legal entity that's owned by Activision Blizzard, and all of the things that are owned by Activision Blizzard report up to that board of directors that we've been discussing. And it sounds like I also had a look at who's on the board of directors, and as the guys have said, there's not loads of internal or people that have come through the ranks. There's lots of kind of, I don't know, probably old, white, male and stale people on the board. But I think that's often the way it goes.
Yeah, that's definitely the common occurrence for a board of directors. You usually don't want someone that's kind of been through the company unless they're a founder, because you want the board to kind of have a fresh perspective and to be able to make these judgments kind of without the internal conflict there. But to add one piece of context, Mike Morhaime was the CEO of Blizzard until he left into that strategic consulting and now nothing role.
An interesting question is, do you think they're leaving that CEO role empty on purpose, or do you think they're going to look for someone?
Took the words out of my mouth. What do you guys think? Because obviously J. Allen Brack was instituted just as president, I believe. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's what's been reported.
So do you think that is something that, obviously people historically have different understandings of those two roles, CEO versus president, but do you think that it's simply if you will, a cosmetic difference, and he still has obviously, all the same duties and responsibilities that Mike Morhaime would have had? Or do you think that they've changed the title to president because they have actually somewhat changed the role?
Yeah, it's a good question. It'd be great to know definitively the answer, but my impression is that they were doing a similar role. But I would have thought the CEO role is probably more akin to what he's doing. The president role, kind of, to me, that speaks of a figurehead. And when Blizzard is owned by Activision Blizzard, I'm not sure that you need a president. I think you need a CEO there, but do you need a president? I'm not sure. So it seems to me a little bit odd, but I'm interested to hear what Gleb and Hobo think about it.
Titles can mean everything and nothing at the same time, so it's kind of hard to interpret that. It could be the same role, it could be different. I wouldn't have any opinion.
Yeah, it's just like Hobo said, it's hard to say without the inner workings of the company being apparent to us. And
it would be a good sign to see someone promoted from within to get that CEO title. I would like that, but hiring someone from the outside too, with video game experience to get that CEO title. Or, again, the president title and that role could be exactly what the CEO title was. So it's kind of hard to tell from that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that would worry me if they ended up doing is taking someone that was Activision for the last 20 years before it became Activision Blizzard and put them in the CEO Blizzard spot. That would really signal a shift to me that's being run by Activision and it's not really a true part. But given they haven't went that way, hopefully it'll say it like that.
Agreed.
I think I'd agree with that as well. When I was working for a company that was acquired, the the day that I joined the company, actually, the existing president was sacked and replaced by somebody from the parent company. So that was a very auspicious start to my time. But apparently the president also got a member of staff pregnant, so he probably had it coming. So the person from the parent company came in and he didn't last very long. Another person from the parent company was put in as president. He didn't last very long. And the person that eventually got that role and managed to sustain it still there at the moment is someone who was promoted from actually kind of sort of a mid-management, not one of the most senior managers, but kind of one of the kind of leaders who had a lot of loyalty from the staff. And I think Activision Blizzard Smart, they'll try and do something similar to that.
Guys, I've got a big one for you here, and let's sort of dive into this one. And we've lightly danced around it, but let's see if anyone can give a sort of substantial guess, I guess, to this one. But as gamers, you see a lot of people on Twitter, Discord, all that jazz, talking about the muscle that Activision flexes over Blizzard creatively. And everyone's saying, as one of you guys mentioned earlier, here we go. Look at the puppeteer pulling the puppet strings. They're calling all the shots on design and creative choices with Blizzard games now. It's gone down the shitter. It's pretty much just Activision now. So my question to you guys would be, how much say do you think Activision realistically has over design or creative choices made at Blizzard?
I think I'll jump in first. I think for design choices within a game, clearly I'm just hypothesizing, but I don't think they would have a massive amount of say. You know, the board of directors and the shareholders and parent company Activision Blizzard will set maybe strategic direction, but design choice in a game, how we're going to implement a certain mechanic, I would have thought Blizzard still have absolutely free reign on what they're doing. When I was acquired, we still were doing what we were doing in the way that we were doing it.
And I'm being reminded to say, and I really should add this if it didn't sort of speak for itself, but it's good to just get it out there. When I ask a loaded question like this, it's obviously, you know, none of us work for Activision Blizzard or anything. It's highly speculative, but even, you know, keeping that in mind, having a bit of fun. Sorry, we'll keep going from there. Does anyone else have anything on that?
Yeah, this is very subjective, but, yeah, I think on day-to-day kind of decision-making and design, if they want a certain thing in a game or not is not going to be up to Activision. I think the way they kind of put the thumb down would be to their kind of corporate goals or strategic goals throughout the year, and kind of hint at how they should get there. But the way that Blizzard gets there, I think is up to them.
Yeah, and I agree. Thinking about some of the stuff that Blizzard has added over the years since they were acquired by Activision, stuff like looking for raid, garrison, stuff like that. None of that really came from Activision. That's not how a company would typically work in different divisions. But at the end of the day, if the CEO is an Activision Blizzard guy, he's setting the budgets, and if Blizzard needs to hit those budgets and they're missing in certain places, they may rely on certain stuff that they typically would not have done, like I referenced before, selling mounts, selling pets, stuff like that. But I don't think that Activision would be saying implement this zone, implement any of that kind of stuff.
So you're saying that whole move towards obviously cash shops and things like that, and such a heavy, not reliance, but heavy push on that kind of thing might be less so Activision saying do this or else, as opposed to Blizzard feeling budgetary heat and the needing to hit targets and going, we need to scrap in extra cash where we can. Here's something that we can implement.
Yeah, again, it's all speculation, like you said, and I don't want to land myself in any trouble trying to pronounce the exact inner workings of Blizzard. But if I had to take a guess, I do think that Blizzard, they may not have fully wanted to do it or something like that, but at the end of the day, they probably didn't put up the biggest fight to implement this kind of stuff.
I think the flip side of this is if people are buying this stuff, then they want it. There's demand. And you know, if you start to implement some of these features in the game and people take to it, and it's a way that you can generate extra money out of a game, and actually you can reinvest that money to make even better games you can bring to a wider audience. You know, it's not necessarily in principle a bad thing. I know it gets a lot of bad press, but
I must admit, I do get a kick out of it a little bit. Now, in saying this, look, I am very anti-cash shops in terms of the fact that I don't think I've ever bought anything from a cash shop. Like, I'm not a cosmetic guy. I don't care about any of that stuff. You know, I just don't do it. Like, maybe if I have ever bought anything, I mean, maybe in my life I've spent all of $10 on cash shop stuff. I'm not sure, but I can't remember any one transaction that I could recite to you now. But I do enjoy obviously the vilification that they get. And I'm on board with that. Don't get me wrong. I think the industry is going into very dangerous waters with this reliance on other sources of revenue like cash shops and whatnot when we stray away from gameplay and things like that. But in saying that, the one thing I would chip in with is they, as you said, they exist for a reason. Like, even though people might think they're evil and whatnot, the reason they're still here is gamers are buying the stuff. And obviously the people implore them, like, stop buying it, stop supporting it. And Blizzard wouldn't have a cash shop up and running if there was such a huge public swell against the nature of it, but it wasn't making money. It's there because it's making money.
I think that's right. And there's also, if people are spending money in the cash shop, that keeps, the price of the game low for the rest of us. I'm like you, Josh. I've never bought an app. I've never made an app purchase. That's my choice. And if other people want to make their own choices and spend money in game and that keeps the cost of my gaming down, then
yeah.
I think it's also important to bring up that the cost of developing cosmetic and things to buy at a cash shop like that, probably the sunk cost, the cost to make it probably isn't much from a design standpoint. So you're looking at a pretty good chunk of profit there if you do sell that stuff. And it's not like designing a dungeon or a raid where you have to put in hours of Q&A and all this, kind of investment into it. And then at the end of the day, you're only getting the subscription revenue. So you're not getting direct revenue from that, but you're getting direct revenue from pretty easily designed, cosmetic stuff. So I think that's another thing to consider.
Right. And I think like Hobo just said that stuff is very low cost, high revenue. The people that are making these decisions, they're not just making them willy-nilly deciding, oh, let's add some cash shop. They've done extensive amounts of research, math, psychology studies behind it. And they know that if this stuff is bringing in money, it's worth it regardless of the ramifications. And that's why we're seeing it all around the gaming industry, not just with Activision.
Yeah. And I think the caveat I would add to what I was saying before is that I don't agree with kind of pay to win. It's got to be competitive. But if it's cosmetic, then I'm happy for people to fill.
While we're here on this slight tangent, I guess I'd ask you guys as well, just in terms of your observations of the industry, and I'm not sure whether you invest in other gaming companies or not, or whether you've sort of thought about it at some point in the future, but we talk, and I do want to dive into this later on, trust me, I've got some questions lined up, but just while we're here, we talk about, the on-swell of games as a service and how the gaming industry has been changing over the last few years, and we've just been talking about cash shops and whatnot, but in terms of how that affects the bottom line of companies, and I think a lot of the results are there to be researched online, that this is happening because people are making bank. But do you feel that basically the move from a solid sales model, like just selling physical copies of games, and that's how you make your income, and maybe some merchandise and stuff on top of that. And sorry, I should say I'm getting all of this from the lovely Patricia, my girlfriend, who's piping up in Twitch chat and getting very passionate about this topic. But moving on from that solid sales model to the games as a service model, do you feel that basically Activision Blizzard has very much so demonstrated that they are beholden to that? And what's it going to take financially, I guess, is there some hero going to arise and show that no, there is still a decent revenue to be made from the old school model, and perhaps the quality of the game could come back in fashion versus how many services you can attach to it?
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you have the old school model of that reliant, steady stream of revenue. But I mean, you can look at today's example of Netflix has kind of the same model of having that just service, that stream of revenue. And the way to increase that is by increasing the price. So in Blizzard, definitely saw the opportunity in this case to add that cash shop or these options in the game to increase the revenue.
That's right. And they've clearly been working on this for a while. If you look at their annual report for 2017, they made 30% of their revenue from product selling, which I assume to mean kind of, copies of games and that sort of thing. And 70% of their revenue came from subscription, licensing and other revenues. That's huge. And that's been growing over time. And I think, that seems like it's got a huge momentum. That's a big percentage of their revenue that's coming from these extras. Yeah, it's going to take a revolution to go back to how it was. And it seems unlikely to me.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned the word revolution. I think the entire, not even just gaming industry, all of technology really saw it with popularity of smartphones, iPhones. If you think about the kind of games you used to buy on the computer growing up or on your PlayStation, you would just pay a flat $40, $50 and play the game. Or if you're playing something like WoW, $15 a month. But now the expectation for every game on mobile is for it to be free and free to just pay either a cash shop or however you spend money. It's not really that common. You see games on phones that sell for $10 and you get to play it, with no other features. And I think the rest of the industry's reflecting that, since smartphones are really dominating life in every sense.
I think you're absolutely right, Claire, when you see it's not just games, but other media, Spotify, Netflix. We don't buy DVDs anymore. Don't go to Blockbuster. We've got these streaming services. It's just, this is bigger than the gaming industry or Blizzard. This is just the way that we would like to consume our entertainment.
Yep, and Blizzard has hopped right on that with making that Diablo game for mobile. They're not waiting any longer. They probably waited a little longer than they would have liked to, and, have gotten a bigger AAA title on the phone sooner, but they're getting into that marketplace.
Absolutely. And I think the one shame for me is that I think in one of your previous episodes, Josh, you mentioned that you like to read the game manual. I used to love to read the manuals. I used to love all the little bits of lore you used to get in the game manual, or the little insights into how to get the most out of the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a shame, but I think the way that it's gone is perhaps it is the way it is now, and I think it's perhaps improved.
No, we'll be bouncing our grandchildren on our knee one day saying, I remember when you used to be able to pick up the little game manual and it was 120 pages long and you would read through it all night before you played the fucking game. But let me just touch on, now that we've raised it, let's talk about the share price a little bit, because you guys talked about Diablo Immortal, and I want to bring up what your thoughts were on that announcement and its effect and its place in the downturn in Blizzard's share price, or just your general thoughts on that sort of significant drop in value of Blizzard stock, because, and you guys might have some more solid figures there, but it's dropped around about 40% in the last 3 months or so, I believe, which, and if I could just get you to talk about it as well, how significant something like that is in the marketplace.
Sorry, just to contextualize it, that when Blizzard had BlizzCon, they announced Diablo, Mike Morhaime left. The stock market as a whole was doing very poorly. I think when December ended, it had the worst December, at least in the USA, since the Great Depression. So the stock market as a whole was doing really poorly again, and Blizzard is a higher beta stock, which means that if the market does well, they tend to do better because people have more discretionary money to spend on games. But if the market does poorly, it tends to do even worse than the market does, because video games is one of the first things people will cut out of their budgets. But the one thing that makes Blizzard different here from the market is in January so far, Blizzard has not recovered, but the market has. And that to me is personally the most worrying sign, is that the market's shown signs of recovery, but Blizzard is pretty flat for this month so far.
That's absolutely spot on. They're still underperforming the market.
Yep, agreed.
All right. And I mean, I'll ask you guys as someone who, as people who maybe have a lot more history with investing and whatnot, because I know that I've barely touched, getting involved in buying stock and things like that. But I'm not going to lie. The conversations have been flying around the old Countdown to Classic household about, is now the time to buy? And we talk about, the PR hits they've taken recently, and you've just discussed your issues with the fact that they're not recovering despite the fact the market has shown a bit of a bounce back. But I don't know, you have that chat where you say it's still Activision Blizzard. It's still a huge gaming company. Gaming is still big. Gaming's not going anywhere, or is it? I don't know. But, while it's low, do you buy? I mean, Patricia and I have been looking at it saying, should we do it? And, you see people, I've always equated to sports, obviously, when you're thinking about buying stock. There's always people who will poo-poo it and go, you're a fucking idiot. They're going down the shitter. Fine, throw your money away. And then there's the people who laugh at them and say, mate, you don't know anything. Trust me, this thing is going to go sky high. And we've got things like Diablo Immortal coming, and everyone's saying, just wait until that hits the Chinese market. Like, you will all be shocked at the effect that has on the stock price and whatnot. What do you guys think? Like, as sort of people who don't own Blizzard stock, would you be at all interested in buying at the moment?
definitely been thinking about it. I think Diablo Immortal, I think that's absolutely upset a big proportion of Blizzard's traditional fan base, and I think the way they unveiled it perhaps didn't have that PC gaming mecca. I think that didn't do themselves any favours, but I think Diablo Immortal probably will be a big success for them. There's a massive mobile gaming market, and I think in the long term, the outlook is looking alright. At some point, Classic is going to come online, and then World of Warcraft subscription is going to spike up a bit. I'm not sure the outlook is that bad. I think it's definitely something I'm considering.
Yeah, I can agree with that. The outlook is definitely not bad because they do have some things on the horizon that could come up and be successful with Classic and then the Diablo Immortal. But it all depends really on do you believe if Diablo Immortal is going to be successful in breaching that market and then creating that market share and then generating that revenue and profit?
Yeah, and I kind of agree with both of you guys. I want to echo what you're saying is that personally, I think, right now the stock, it really took a beating in the last couple of months. But if you look at what's going forward, there's going to be obviously WoW Classic. We're all excited about it. Hopefully there's 10 million subscriptions. Blizzard's back to what it used to be, but that'll remain to be seen. But then Diablo Immortal, like you guys are mentioning, China, huge market, the opportunity for them to succeed there. And then of course Overwatch League, which we haven't really discussed yet, but the future of esports is really, really bright. Like a lot of people are comparing the industry right now to what the NFL, NBA were like in the 1920s when sports were really just starting to become a thing around the country, around the world. And if Blizzard is going to be on the forefront for this and they can establish Overwatch League as like the preeminent esports league, the preeminent esport, that would be massive for them. But again, to do it is a lot harder than it is to say that you're going to do it. So that'll just remain to be seen.
Very good point there. I completely forgot about the esports angle, but I completely agree with you there. I was kind of hoping someone would laugh at us maniacally and go, throw your money away. Fine. Go for Activision Blizzard stocks. But that's all right. If anyone's listening and they want to call in and they do have that mindset, then please do hit me up. But in the meantime, guys, we talked about in the lead up to this call as well. Obviously, many listeners and you guys are aware of the news with what happened with Bungie recently and the dissolution of that, I guess, working arrangement, if you will. It was a publishing contract that, has now gone the way of the dodo between Bungie and Blizzard. And, again, this is one of those things that I've seen, as one of the, driving factors behind this call is the amount of misinformation or people just simply not understanding what was going on there, because the knee-jerk reaction since that news came was rejoice amongst gamers, and then immediately followed by, great, now Blizzard hopefully will do it too. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because Blizzard's got a little bit more than a publishing agreement with Activision. As we said, it's a merger. They're literally they are effectively the same thing. So just talk about now, whoever wants to jump in first, with the nature of the Bungie partnership and the difference between that and Blizzard, and what you may have read online that made you shake your head a bit, or what you'd like to set straight.
The situation with Bungie that was a time-limited partnership. It was clear from the start in, all the legal agreements, there was a 10-year deal, with an end point. That's just not the case for Blizzard. I'm a long-time kind of Halo fan, and I played the two Destiny games. I'll be interested to see where Bungie go. It's not going to make a huge difference to what's happening with Destiny 2 at the moment. I don't think, similar to what we were saying about how did Blizzard change when Activision Blizzard came on the scene. These things take time, so we'll see what happens over the next few years, but I'm excited to see some more Bungie games in the future.
Yeah, one interesting thing that I was actually reading about the Bungie agreement is that when they originally signed their deal with Activision to publish their games, it was a 10-year deal, and the fact that they left after 8 years, whether they just had an opt-out on the contract or something went sour in their relationship, that brings concern to me personally, because if, Destiny 2 being on the Battle.net platform gave them more exposure, Activision helped them advertise, and I saw a number of advertisements. If that still wasn't enough of a cost-benefit analysis worthwhile for them, whether it be lack of freedom in terms of some of the stuff they wanted to add, that's pretty worrisome to me. So again, we don't know exactly why they left. Maybe they just wanted freedom, and for them, they were willing to pay any price, even if it meant less revenue. But it's not the best thing if they're leaving their contract earlier than they could have.
Bungie had a publishing agreement with Activision rather than Blizzard being owned by Activision.
I was doing some research before about some of the bigger mergers and acquisitions in the past and just trying to relate it to Activision and Blizzard. And unfortunately, looking at some examples that I saw were worrisome for me as a big fan of Blizzard is if you think about companies like AOL and Time Warner, where Time Warner purchased AOL and kind of ran them into the ground. You don't really see or hear much about AOL anymore. You have HP that purchased Compaq. And of course, Compaq still has some machines, but it's really just HP's company. You don't hear much about Compaq. Well, hearing about examples like that in the past where there have been two companies coming together, primarily just because they were dominant in their industry, they may not have had perfect synergy, and that was evidenced by their lack of success due to the different cultures. It's very sad to see the smaller companies kind of just getting absorbed and not being able to escape. So that's my worry of worst case for Blizzard, since they don't have that option that Bungie does to just, terminate their contract and leave. They're part of the company, and it would be very, very difficult for them to split out. It would require someone with a shitload of money to pretty much come in and buy out the stock from Activision, but then there would also need to be an agreement. They couldn't just buy out the stock and say, Blizzard is mine now. It would have to be a very weird kind of deal for Activision to spin them off as their own company and then sell them. But, however, good news before I just finish up on this point is looking back, there's also the example of Daimler, the company in Germany that owns Mercedes-Benz. They purchased Chrysler in the 90s. They tried to integrate their cultures. It was a German culture versus American culture. Things really didn't go well. And then Chrysler ended up being spun off and sold out on their own. So there is light at the end of the tunnel that they could potentially go back to being their own independent company. Again, it's happened before. It's not unheard of. So just hoping that, something like that could potentially happen.
I'm so glad you answered that, because that was literally my next question of if it's even a possibility. And there you go.
I think it's absolutely possible if Activision Blizzard decides that it wants to sell Blizzard, it wants to release money to invest in something else, then it absolutely is possible. It's within their gift to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess as you say, look, it might very well be a snowball's chance in hell, but it's still, corporately and legally possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It'd just take a lot of money because they'd probably put it on the open market and people would be bidding for them. So it would take definitely a lot of money to get that.
Okay. Now, guys, I just want to move on to the notion of corporate cost cutting, because we've heard the news that this is now very much so a driving factor of Blizzard going into 2019 and beyond. And they're looking to, knock a few things off and tighten the belt as you do. And I wanted to ask you guys, when the word of God comes down the corporate ladder and you've heard from the higher ups, it's cost cutting. That's our, mantra this year. Where would a company like Activision Blizzard look first, and how does that affect products like online games? And obviously we've got the examples with things like, you guys had a great chat about it in the Discord, because we talked about what happened over at the Ireland office in Cork, where 100 people took a pretty hefty payout to walk away. And Gleb, you also talked about the notion of robotic process automation, and we'll get into all of that. So, Gleb, I might start with you. What do you think will happen in terms of the cost cutting at Blizzard? And why don't you talk about that RPA stuff as well?
Yeah, right. So to answer your first question about where would they cut costs first in a scenario like this, it would generally come down to stuff that can be easily automated, because that's really where tech is going. You have AI, machine learning, stuff like that can oftentimes augment or improve the work that people is doing, but a lot of times it can replace them entirely or just kind of consolidate the amount of human jobs that need to be there to do such a thing. So what I brought up in the Discord before, I had experience. We were working on a company-wide initiative to consolidate some of our internal support functions, and one of the things that we ended up doing was moving a lot of people that were just on a phone answering calls to help you with your paychecks, payroll, any kind of that stuff. Moving that into more of an automated case resolution system using a certain software where, based on the kind of ticket you open, it kind of smart routes it, sees if it can tie it to a certain knowledge article that will answer your question. If not, you get put through an agent or something like that. But stuff that made it so you didn't just have to call in every time waste the resources of just having people sitting around waiting for phone calls to get your questions answered. And it proved to be really efficient. Granted, a lot of people lost their jobs, and that hurt culture. It's hard to know, if it was worth it. That's stuff that is kind of hard to quantify. But that's really where a lot of these cost-cutting measures look first. See, what can we do to kind of automate a certain job, or at least make someone's job easier so we don't need as many people doing these jobs. And it was just like you were talking about, we saw that in Ireland where a lot of the GMs had their contracts bought out. If you think about being a GM in WoW specifically, you don't need to talk with your voice or anything like that. It could be a robot either responding with automated questions or automated responses, and then have a human GM step in, try and resolve the case if the computer can't do it. Then you also have things like chat monitoring, where if someone gets reported, let's say 10 times in 5 minutes, obviously they know something is going on, so let's give them a 10-minute mute. If it happens again, then let's have a human look over it. But if not, we don't need a person to, look at someone just saying a bunch of curse words and racism in the trade channel. That's not something that a human really should be doing. It's not the best use of their resources. And then the last part about this specifically being an online game, it could all be done over text, or it is done all over text. So you don't need to know, what the person sounds like. I know in America, a lot of companies preach that they have their contact centers all in the US. You call, you get answered by an American right away. There's no way of knowing that if you're online, and if you're speaking with someone who has perfect written English, for you, it makes completely no difference, and Blizzard could save potentially a lot of money there.
I think there's two things I'll say. One is we've seen the Ireland example that you quoted, Josh. I think the way that Blizzard handled that is pretty good. Often when companies need to cut costs, try and do it quickly, it can be quite, it's painful when people lose their jobs. But, in the Blizzard example, they've had nice payouts. They've had, they've been taken care of. And that's not always the case. And that, in my experience, when our company was acquired, one of the things that was looked at is, are there products and services that we're offering that just aren't profitable? And actually a whole team of people was got rid of 10 people for Christmas, just before Christmas. It was horrible. They were gone. That, the business decided we're not offering that service anymore, out the door. And that was really bad for morale. So it's really encouraging. I think that Blizzard have done, handled their GM layoffs in the way that they have. But we've also seen, the big announcements about Heroes of the Storm. Whether or not they handled that as well, I'm not sure, but they've seen potentially that's a product or a service that's not going to be as profitable as perhaps they thought. And actually, where they're going to nip it in the bud and not go down that route, try and be a bit more streamlined. And we've already seen that, and perhaps shows there's a ruthless streak there as well.
I wouldn't know directly on where Blizzard would be able to cut the cost, but I do know the logic and thinking behind it. I have dealt with a large pharmaceutical company acquiring a smaller U.S. company, and then the U.S. company had some pretty expensive locations. Then they kind of just said, you know what, we can do this cheaper in India. Let's just we got to ship these guys out, give them severance, and send them on their way. So I don't know how Blizzard would do it in that sense, but it is viewed in that light, in a corporate light like that.
Well, guys, I'll move on to this one, and a lot was made as well. We have, again, briefly touched on it, but Mike Morhaim's departure, and, people were saying, oh my God, here we go. This is another death bell for Blizzard. He's leaving early. He only just went into this advisory role a few months ago when he swapped, when obviously J. Allen Brack took over as president. He wants out. He's done. Blizzard's going down the shitter. And, there was again a pushback against that, saying, no, this is how executive handovers work. Like, Mike Morhaim was effectively retiring. He wasn't going to stick around forever. So this is actually not a strange thing that's happened. But what were your thoughts on the news that, Mike Morhaim was leaving just a scant sort of 3 months after taking that advisory role? Did you even blink, or were you like, well, yeah, that's how retirement works? Or were you like, that is a little early?
That is 100% how CEO retirements work. I deal with this a lot, trying to structure those packages. And a lot of times a CEO, they don't want to go to another company. They kind of want to just drift off into the distance. They'll take that advisory role. They'll take similar compensation to that, with the full intention of leaving in a few months to a year. So seeing him leave after 3 months, or that time frame, is not surprising in the slightest.
I think that's right. And my first reaction was kind of emotional, and it was like, oh, he's going, as you said, Josh, some people reacted, oh, Blizzard had down the Swanee, but I think Hobo's right. That's generally how things go. It's managed. If he went straight out the door, that would have spooked shareholders potentially. So, and gamers. So it's a managed transition often. And you step aside when you're the senior person, you're used to running the show, and you've now stepped aside, and all of a sudden you're not the big boots at the table. And I think people perhaps leave those kind of roles sooner than they thought they might, because it's a shock to them.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at Mike Morhaim's history, he was at Blizzard for, I want to say, almost 30 years from when he founded the company until what it will be in 2019. And for a lot of those years, he was the head guy in charge. And like you just mentioned, he was running shop. And it's pretty different if you've been running a company for that long to start taking orders, and can be pretty difficult sometimes. And, given how long he's been around, it's kind of a standard retirement. I think it's called a golden handshake. I've heard different phrases like a golden parachute, golden handcuff,
golden
like
parachute.
That. Yeah, so it's usually a certain agreement in the contract where if a company acquires another one, they can get the CEO of the company that's being acquired can get certain compensation when they leave in case certain things happen as part of the acquisition. So it seems all pretty par.
Yeah, I can speak more to that. Generally, what a golden parachute is when you trigger in the U.S., the law is 280G. It's a tax law where I think it's 3x a certain amount of money. I think it's a salary. But what that does is what he's talking about is a change of control trigger. Usually you get a certain amount of equity. But that's usually when you're let go for not for cause is a legal term, or in a change of control, which is when a company acquires someone. In this case, this is a little more of a kind of a cheeky way to do it, when there is no kind of firing or change in company structure, but it's just he wants to retire. So him taking that strategic role probably wasn't doing too much during that time, kind of just raking it in.
Yeah, and I think that one thing about California, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not sure if you'd know, Hobo, given your line of work. You know if California has non-compete clauses that he may have to?
They do not. California and Mass, I know for sure, do not have non-compete clauses. It's illegal.
Yeah, so just for all the listeners, what a non-compete clause is, it means that if you leave your employer, you can't work for any other company in that industry or make your own company within a certain amount of time. But given that that's not legal in California, it could be that he just wants to, start up a smaller shop and go back to being the head honcho. It's hard to really predict because I don't know Mike Morhaim. I'm not going to present like I know what's in his head, but I guess we can see a few years down from now if that's the route that he just wanted to take.
Yeah, it is interesting because he could just start up his own shop today and there's nothing to stop him. Usually executives, especially high-level executives getting paid that much money, have 1 to 2 year non-compete clauses. So it's definitely interesting that he doesn't. I don't know if anything's going to happen because of that, but it's interesting.
Isn't he sticking around until the end of April, though? He's not out the door quite yet.
I think so.
Yeah, that's why I read a line as well that he's staying in that advisory capacity till April.
So, he's been doing that a couple of months. He's still got a few more months to go.
Yeah.
I think, but relatively, that's quite a long period to kind of.
One thing I wanted to ask you guys that I forgot when we were talking about the share price is, did you find it noteworthy at all, or is it pretty much par for the course to see that, Mike Morhaim's one of the higher ups that has been selling off a lot of his Blizzard stock? I think Brian Kelly might have been another one, but maybe it was someone else. There was a couple of pretty notable employees, like right up there up the chain, who have been selling like hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars worth of Blizzard stock, Activision Blizzard stock lately. Do you read into that at all?
For the listeners to go throughout that process, a lot of times people will just expect them to, I'm going to sell a day before this news is going to hit. So for an executive to sell stock, they have to have a declaration to the SEC in the U.S. and they have to give notice. I don't know the time period, but they have to give a long notice. They're going to sell this many shares on this date, so there's no insider trading. Reading into them selling stock, they may just want some more spending money. I don't really know. That's probably their decision. They may feel like it's a good time to kind of cash out those shares. They're going to get some more later. So, I need some more spending money for another yacht or something.
Yeah, and something that I've seen in the past from different executives is that a lot of their contracts will be paid in what's called options. And what that means is that if the executive either just stays on for 3 years, let's say, or his company hits a revenue goal or share price goal, they'll get awarded, like, let's say 300,000 shares for getting 50 billion in revenue in 2019. Let's just use that as an example. If they hit that goal, they will get those shares, and a lot of times they'll just sell them instantly because they'd rather hold a lot of cash or just have that cash rather than holding a lot of shares, which they'll amass just by staying at the company and having success.
All right, guys, second last topic I want to bring up. Now, we talked about it earlier. We teased it. Let's talk about the board of directors. Let's talk about shareholder fiduciary obligations. Let's talk about what Activision Blizzard owes its shareholders. And we talk about this so much, and so many people talk about it. Perhaps they've never invested in anything before, but, you know, we're all aware of what shareholders are. But a lot of people are in the dark, like me, exactly what Activision Blizzard's duty is to its shareholders. And I hadn't even considered the thought of the board of directors before either. And obviously you guys raised that through this chat. So let's kick it off to you in terms of, let's start with the board of directors and then we'll go to the shareholders from there. Let's talk about the board of directors' role in terms of directing traffic with the decisions that Blizzard and Activision make.
The board's role essentially is to kind of guide the company in the correct direction to maximize shareholder value. And what that means is maximizing the share price and kind of moving the market that way. So they need to kind of facilitate the decisions to make to the company, the C-suite to make them kind of maximize the share price in that rate. So the board's responsibility is to kind of maximize profits in that sense, but they're not on the day to day. They want the overall arching decisions to be able to maximize the profits and maximize share price. I think someone mentioned that it's a little different in the U.S. The duty to the shareholders in the U.S. is to maximize shareholder value, and in other places it isn't. So that's a little interesting too.
Yeah, that's right. Before we started having this conversation, I wasn't aware of that. That, you know, it's a legal requirement for the board of directors in the US to absolutely maximize shareholder value, whereas in the EU and other places, perhaps slightly different. And in the UK, there's a corporate governance code, and one of the things it says in there is it's about, board of directors has to ensure kind of long-term increase in value for shareholders, but they've also got to take account of wider stakeholder needs. So that's staff, that's customers, potentially the environment, other stakeholders, and that's the company that I work in now. That's a massive driving force for us, is making sure that we're balancing the needs of our customers and our shareholders.
Yeah, there's definitely a stark difference between maximizing it for the stakeholders and shareholders. For anyone that doesn't know, a stakeholder is anyone that interacts with the company. So I'm a stakeholder at Blizzard. I play WoW. So I'm not a shareholder. I don't have investments in Blizzard. So that would be the difference there.
When we do talk about the shareholders and obviously the fear that the stock price will drop any further, and everything that Activision Blizzard and the board of directors will be doing to correct that trend and stick that spike going in the other direction, hopefully up for them in the future, what kind of decisions or knee-jerk reactions do you think they might have in terms of now Activision putting, we talk about turning the heat up on Blizzard a little bit, going like, things are not going in the right direction. We are telling you to do this because we have this duty to the shareholders for that price to go up instead of down. And we talk about, the speculation over moving more towards games as a service and moving further away from, focusing on just getting the quality of the game as good as it can be. So I guess I'm saying, what do you see happening in the future, knowing now what they owe to the shareholders and the squeeze that Activision or Bobby Kotick might put on Blizzard?
One of the first things I'd say is I'd hope that they wouldn't have any knee-jerk reactions to, the share price has dropped. They're obviously having a bit of a crap time of it at the moment, but most of their investors in Activision Blizzard are big institutional organizations. They're not individuals, and hopefully they're kind of in it for the long haul, and it's about long-term kind of maximization of value. But maybe that's just my sort of naive European view, as we already talked about different kind of legal requirements. But I think share prices go up and down. They need to, I would say, not make knee-jerk reactions, and as we already talked about, the degree to which Activision actively meddle in decisions that Blizzard are making. I'm not sure they do, but that sense, that direction from the top is there, and that will be present in, lower down in Blizzard's decision making. They will feel that, that direction from the top. That will be one of the things they're considering, and it'll be almost a subtle, maybe a subtle shift in their decision making, almost self-censoring, saying, well, what do the higher ups want, rather than they told us what to do, so we're doing it.
One thing to watch going forward would be possibly a change in their compensation program. They currently, I know Gleb was talking about it earlier, about certain metrics they have to hit to receive their equity awards. Specifically for Blizzard, they have almost, for most executives, everything tied to operating income, and specifically for Blizzard's top executive, Blizzard's operating income. So speaking from a shareholder's perspective, I wouldn't be too happy about that, because I want a higher share price, and I would rather have the stock awards tied to, say, a 5-year return on the share price, rather than a 5-year operating income. There's still overlap in those goals, in how they're reached, but from a shareholder's perspective, they don't have much incentives tied to share price. So, from a non-shareholder viewpoint, I actually don't mind that, because they're not tied to that daily fluctuation of stock price, and they're kind of left to just work on the games themselves. But then again, I don't believe just using a single metric of operating income is the best for the executives, that population, and just using that, to value them. I would like to see the share price, being worked in there at some point, but that would be an interesting thing coming forward. And if anyone wants to watch out for that, their proxy should be released in March or April.
Yeah, and one very important thing that I think the board of directors and the head honchos in Activision Blizzard will do, they're going to really zoom out and take a longer picture perspective. Their stock is down 40% in the past 3 months or so, where it's fallen from $80 to around $50. But if you zoom out and go at 6 years ago, it was only around $12. So even after this huge fall they've had in the past 3 months, they're still up over 4 times over the past 6 years, which is nothing to laugh at. So they've done pretty well. They're going to go in trying to figure out their strategy, but they're probably not going to try and change too much of what they're doing. They're going to make subtle changes here, subtle changes there, and adapt to the marketplace. But they've had success aside from this 3-month patch, so they'll make sure to keep that in perspective as well.
Just to wind up everything, guys, Aaron, I just want to turn to you, and if you other two guys have some comments on Aaron's points, I'd love to hear it. But just the last thing I want to touch on is a post that you made in that channel that I created for you guys. And Aaron, you started talking about who actually makes up Activision Blizzard shareholders, and you had some great stats there of the companies involved. And you also went on to talk about, some of the problems with Vivendi as well, in terms of your issues with when Vivendi left the picture and what happened as a result of that, and also the fact that Blizzard themselves hasn't necessarily had a clear track record the whole time, regardless of Activision's involvement. If I could get you just to find that post in the Discord again, because I'd love to hear you just sort of voice that and maybe extrapolate on it a little bit if you can, and I'll kick you off with why don't you explain to everyone, when we talk about the Activision Blizzard shareholders, who are they?
Most of Blizzard's shareholders are kind of institutional shareholders, so it's a big kind of financial services firms. I think the biggest one is, the acronym I think is FMR.
FMR, yep.
And they own Fidelity, so a big investment.
You said they have about 14%, is that right?
That's right. So collectively, the institutional organizations have 89% of the shares, and then of the total shares, FMR have 14%. I think BlackRock and another firm have about 7 or 8 each, so they're kind of the bigger holders. But there's no kind of one powerhouse. 51% shareholder. These are kind of disparate groups, and it looks like if there's only 11% individual holdings, then you haven't got management isn't holding massive percent of the stock anymore.
And why is it, if I could just kick you on with this one, why did you think that Vivendi leaving the picture completely 2 years ago was important?
I think, there's a lot being made, and one of the reasons we're having this discussion is whether there's kind of the nefarious influence of Activision Blizzard on Blizzard, and is that dumbing down quality, or has that affected what Blizzard are doing? And I think my feeling is perhaps not, and this is just my opinion, but I think, we talked about Vivendi being in the picture before, and they're actually a French firm. I think they're French or European certainly, and they are involved in all sorts of different entertainment. And in the 90s and 2000s, they were acquiring lots of businesses. They were diversifying their portfolio. They had a lot of stuff going on. They were buying things. And they got themselves into a bit of a mess. And I think in 2002, they had to post a 23 billion euro loss. They were in dire straits. And I think that's potentially one of the things that led them to eventually have that, merger of the part of Vivendi that owned Blizzard with Activision Blizzard. And I think, the fact that Vivendi were doing all sorts of crazy stuff and get themselves in a mess perhaps gave Blizzard, some real creative license. As long as they were making revenue, they could do whatever they want. And I think perhaps that it's not so much Blizzard is now overseeing Blizzard, but the fact that you've lost Vivendi, who perhaps, I don't know anything about them, but they maybe weren't doing a great job of overseeing, the business that they owned. And I think even if it wasn't Activision Blizzard, we probably would still be seeing some of the changes we're seeing at Blizzard at the moment. And they've grown and they've changed, and the people that are there are different, and Blizzard's become this massively successful thing. So I think the point I was trying to make is that I don't think Activision Blizzard is necessarily their influence. I think we perhaps would be seeing these things happening at Blizzard anyway. But that was just, I just did a bit of background research to see who the previous owners were, and I don't think they cover themselves in glory.
All right. Thanks so much for that, mate. Now, look, guys, you other two guys, I'll give you a chance now. Does anyone have any final thoughts just as we wrap up this call?
One more thing of note I could add. I can give some confidential information about that we have. The average voluntary turnover in the United States for tech companies is about 14%, 20% in total, including like firings and retirees. So it's been a while since the Activision Blizzard started, and compounding that 14%, granted that's gonna be different year over year, but the people who you remember making classic WoW or vanilla WoW aren't probably there anymore, and a lot of them aren't, and that's part of the culture change. You have Activision there being an influence, but you also have just a normal corporate change going on that happens anytime you have a growing firm. And so I think my takeaway is the gripe Activision gets for coming or being that influence over Blizzard, I think is a little unwarranted, and I think a lot of decisions that Blizzard has made really fall back on themselves rather than Activision, and that's pretty much my final takeaway.
Yeah, and I'll have to agree with Hobo there. I think a lot of it is just kind of growing pains, just becoming a huge corporation in America, that as you get more layers and more stacks, you get further and further from the developers, the people that are super really into making every single level, every single dungeon. So that just happens to separate as the companies get bigger and bigger. But I think when we look back at what Blizzard is doing with classic WoW down the line, it's going to be a very, very important moment in how developers look at their games. I can't really remember any other time in history. I know Rift just released a server, I think last year, where they did like a classic launch, but for a company to admit that so the state that their game was in over a decade ago may have been preferable to certain players, and it's worth their investment to develop that again, I think that's really going to be looked at as a major point in at least the genre, if not all of gaming.
I think that's right. When World of Warcraft was released, Blizzard were kind of disruptors in that market, in the MMO market. This was new for them. They had this new exciting product, and they're now, they're the biggest shop in town. They're the monopolist. They don't need to work perhaps as hard to maintain the subs, and they've been losing subs. And now we're going back to the time where Blizzard were this, World of Warcraft was this new thing. It was the hot thing on the block. And for me, that's really exciting. I can't wait for Classic to come out.
All right. On that note, guys, all of you, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show and for obviously getting as nitty gritty as we did on this call. I'm sure a lot of listeners are very thankful to all of you for sort of not pulling any punches and explaining everything to us and letting us sort of just get a better grasp on this topic overall and dispel a few commonly held misconceptions along the way. So look, guys, you're welcome back anytime. Thanks so much again, and have a good one, all of you.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Hi everyone, Josh here. I just want to take a quick moment to remind you that while Countdown to Classic will always be a podcast you can get for free, if you do happen to really enjoy the show and find yourself always coming back for more, then please do check out the show's Patreon page to see how you can help keep the lights on at Countdown to Classic, and even vote on show content as the show continues to bring you more and more classic WoW goodness. Alternatively, if monthly subscriptions aren't your thing, you can always visit the show's tip jar over at Ko-Fi, with that link being in the show notes and on the website too. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, we've got a couple more Countdown to Classic callers on the line, and again, we're speaking with Dave. Dave, how are you?
Doing great, Josh.
Good. Thanks so much for calling again, mate. And also on the line, we have a new Countdown to Classic listener or caller, Wiley Kit. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show, the both of you. Now, you're both here because, again, we've got a couple of listeners who are talking on a similar topic, and it's something that I've been wanting to touch on the show for a little while, and luckily both of you shared some details about your stories with me, and we're happy to come and share those stories as well with the larger audience of Countdown to Classic. And Dave, I might start with you. We're touching on basically we're playing World of Warcraft, but also gaming in general with physical impairments. And it's the case that you're legally blind, isn't that right?
It is, Josh.
So if I can just get a few details from you, if you can just explain to people what impairment you have to your vision and what it takes to be classified as legally blind, and what you can and can't see when you game.
Okay, well, being legally blind in Canada, I'm not sure if this is the same around the world, you need to have worse than 2200 vision. I'm probably about 2300 now vision. So to give it, for people that have like glasses, like I'm probably about like a -5, but it cannot be corrected. So what I have is something called Stargardt's, which is an early form of macular degeneration. So it means that as like cells die in the back of my eye, basically they're not being replenished, so they cause my vision to be fuzzy.
Okay, and how does that work when you're staring at a screen or a TV for PC or console gaming?
Staring at a TV is hard for me because I find the closer I am, the better, and the screen is too big.
Uh-huh.
So I find being on about a 22-inch screen and being about 8 inches away for me is the sweet spot, but nothing will ever make it perfectly clear, so I always struggle with detail.
Okay, fair enough. Now you mentioned that 8-inch gap. So, you've obviously got a setup that's conducive to you and dealing with the vision issue. Is it, the case that, any particular monitors or anything you gravitate towards, or it's all the same?
No, it's all the same, right? Like a higher quality monitor would just be lost on me. But it's pretty funny. My dad used to always give me a hard time for being like hunched over my computer, and now he feels like a bit like a dick.
Okay. Now, Wiley Kid, I'll turn to you, and your impairment is quite different to that, and it's a bit of a contrast from obviously sight. You have a physical issue with one of your arms. So you're able to go into a bit of detail about what you deal with when you're trying to game?
Well, I have lost most of the mobility in my left arm due to a car accident several years ago. So, like I'm still able to reach out and touch the computer, but the pain, it causes me physical pain in like my fingers and up my arm. I'm very sensitive to touch due to nerve damage, and I also have something called RSD. So, like while I would be able to reach out and touch it, like I just can't for long periods of time. So I've learned to play with just one arm, on my mouse, and also occasionally like with WoW or something with the action bar. If I don't have room to put it on my mouse, I might click here or there, which I know is like, you know, very frowned upon or whatever, but like it, you know, that's what I have to do sometimes. But I've learned how to like play it all on my mouse, like with programming, because I have one of those Razer Nagas.
Yep.
So I use like all the buttons and I do key bindings and everything. So
it's something that I must admit, I hadn't been really experienced with gaming mouses much at all in the past. And I only got one myself recently. And it has been quite amazing to see how much you can get done with some of these buttons and mapping that you can have on a mouse these days. I'm presuming that, as you may have described, it makes the world of difference for someone like you.
Oh, it really does. Like, I don't think I'd be able to play anymore if it weren't for a mouse like that. Like, I never had used it really prior to getting hurt. In fact, I got one afterwards. I just, you know, I'd seen other people use them and they've said it was like helpful. But like, if I didn't have my mouse, I don't think I'd be able to play.
Now, just one more question on, you mentioned obviously you play World of Warcraft, and we all know that World of Warcraft is quite a social game. You know, you chat with people, you interact with the other players around you in order to go and achieve a goal, finish a quest, you know, sell something or what have you. And, you know, we need to type in what we want to say through, you know, the keyboard if we're in game, or if we're lucky enough, we might be on voice chat in Discord or whatever with a group. But if you do need to chat to someone, do you find you talk less in the game because you're only using the one arm, or do you still go, no, screw it, I'll chat away and just hammer away with the one hand?
Oh, I hammer away with one hand. It takes me longer, but you know, like if I'm in the middle of something, I have to stop. So it's probably not a good idea to try to talk to me if we're like raiding or something, because you know, I'd probably die or get everyone else killed because I usually heal. But, I just type with one hand. It just takes a little while. It's like, elderly typing, just one finger, but whatever, you know.
Fair enough. Dave, I'll come back to you and just ask, in playing World of Warcraft specifically with your condition, what's the hardest part about that particular game and being legally blind and trying to pick up on certain things that are happening on screen?
Well, it's something that basically my eyesight's gotten like worse over time, and it kind of started in my like late teens, right when I was starting WoW. So like initially while I was playing vanilla, my eyesight was pretty much like everyone else's, but as I kind of went through the years, it became harder and harder to see quest text and to see basically like socialize in the game. So like one of my hopes is that within the options of Classic WoW, you might be able to blow up the font a little bit more, or at least I can have an add-on to do that, because otherwise I'm afraid that I will miss out on certain social aspects.
Well, outside of the social side of things, are there any gameplay elements that make it harder for you, or is it's pretty much once you're right up there against the screen, you kind of know what's going on?
I pretty much know what's going on. And some of the more of the technical fights and raiding, I might make a mistake and I'll feel really bad because I'm pretty competitive. But it comes down to like, when I'm doing PvP, right? Like when I watch something like Perplexity's videos where he can basically see the animation of a grenade going off and basically reacts to it. It's that level of detail that I'll never kind of be at that level. And part of me feels sad because of that.
Okay. Now, do you let people know at all if you're grouping with someone, if you join a guild, if you jump in a pug for molten core or what have you? Do you feel the need, if it does happen to affect any element of your gameplay, or if you can't read sometimes what people are saying to you in chat, do you let people know, or do you not feel the need at all?
Now I will. In the past I haven't, but my eyesight's gotten to the point now where people might be able to tell more socially than me playing the game. Because I'll like have strategies of what classes I'll play and everything like that to make sure that I can fill my role properly. But like anyone that's close to me, right? So if we're, within my like, raid and my guild and everything like that, like I just want to be upfront with people, and maybe they'll be a little bit more patient for me reading what they've said. And I think when people kind of like understand your situation, most people are really empathetic.
Okay. And if I can ask the same question of you, Wily Kit, do you find that you need to tell people at any point, or it doesn't matter? They don't need to know? If you are, as you say, you might take a long time in responding to someone, or if you're grouping up or raiding or doing anything like that where you might need to be a little bit more chatty. Do you explain to people like, hey, give me a moment, I'm dealing with this thing here, or do you just let it be?
I think when I was first relearning how to play, I was more vocal about it, because it was quite a challenge to teach myself how to play with just one hand and learn like the muscle memory of where all the buttons are and like all that stuff. So it was a lot more difficult, but as I've learned how to play, I've been less vocal about it because it doesn't affect me as much. I'm usually able to perform about as well as I used to, except for with like, I have some difficulty with mobility, like highly mobile fights, because it's difficult to map that on your mouse, like strafing and all that stuff. But overall, like I don't really find the need to, if I've been in a group with a bunch of people for a long time, I will talk about it, and especially if I'm going to be raiding with them, as you mentioned before, like if they want to talk to me or something and I'm raiding, like I can't respond to them during the raid without having to stop. So, if it's going to be something like that where I'm in like a guild and we're doing like progression raiding or something like that, I will let them know, of course, but generally just like, pick up groups and stuff like that. I don't really say anything about it.
Well, you talked about, progression raiding and you jumping in guild raids and things like that. You've got your setup there. You're all good with your button mapping on your mouse and everything, and you're not finding, much getting in the way of your gameplay. Do you still find, do you have like a sense of pride in the fact that despite, having one of your arms taken out of the equation, that you might still be kicking ass and taking names on the DPS charts or whatever? What class do you play? Are you a healer, tank?
I'm always a heal.
You're a healer. Okay. So
yeah.
Do you take a bit of pride in still kicking ass on the healing charts and being like, I'm just as valuable a member as everyone else. This thing with my arm doesn't get in the way of me having a good time?
I guess that I do. It's not something that I overly try to think about too much. Like I don't try to like separate myself or whatever. I've had people say before that they think it's pretty, amazing that I'm able to play as I do. But I don't really think of it like that. I'm just, we all play games to try to like get away from, or not necessarily as escapism, but just like, something to do for fun and to like take you away for a little while from that stuff. So like, I try not to let my arm affect me both, in life and in the game too,
That's a fantastic attitude, obviously. And David, I'll ask you, I'm guessing you sound like a, very optimistic person as well, just like, Wily Kid. Is it something that, it doesn't get you down at all? You're more than happy to jump into a game, have a bit of fun, and you enjoy it just as much as everyone else?
Yeah, overall, I try to keep the opinion that I'm like a pretty blessed person, right? I live in a Western country and I don't worry about shelter or anything like that. So when it comes to gaming, I think I basically try to position myself where I feel like I can be competitive. And that way I'm not too frustrated for like how I'm performing. So like going into, classic WoW, I'm going to be playing with a friend who I know is like a very competent PvPer. And I'm basically going to play a paladin, as a support class. And that way, I can still feel good about what I'm doing. And I'm doing everything theorycraft wise to like set myself up for success. And like Wily Kid said, like I can have a Naga mouse and I'm going to have everything mapped out, because trying to like search for the right button to push basically would be a nightmare for me. So I think it's basically setting yourself up for being successful in the game with your handicapped, because it's funny, like people look at you like, oh wow, that's so amazing that you're doing it with a handicap, but eventually it just becomes your reality and it doesn't even seem like a handicap. It just seems like what your life is now.
Well, one last topic I just wanted to hit on with the both of you is we've talked about World of Warcraft and how you engage with it. What about other games? Now, you've already mentioned, David, that TVs are kind of out because you can't get right up close to them. So I'm presuming that rules out console games. But do you get involved with any, do you play handhelds and hold them right up to your face? Do you, play other PC games and find that some PC games are more conducive to your condition than others? How do you go with it all?
I detest mobile games just because they're too small for me, so I can't do them.
Yep.
The one game that is kind of my go-to is League of Legends because of how bright it is.
Yep.
And I am able to be competitive at that, like not at like a really high level, but I'm able to basically play a support or a jungle class where I'm not having to last hit minions, which I find is a nightmare, and I'm able to do it. But there are games like my girlfriend will want to play like Call of Duty. And she'll kill me before I even see her because it's all about camouflage and it's on the TV and I just can't do it. And I'm afraid to say it, but like my ego just can't take that, just being murdered over and over again by my girlfriend.
Oh dear. Well, one of those things, you talked about the color differences and the brightness. Is it something that, and I think we mentioned before we started recording, you said one of the benefits of World of Warcraft is that it is that bright cartoony style of game. So talk about how colors affect the way in which you can obviously take in what's on screen.
Yeah, so basically, because things are fuzzy for me, if there's a difference in color, it makes it a lot easier for me to see things, right? So like, for example, I can no longer play tennis. I just can't see the ball. Mm-hmm. But I play squash. And the reason I can play squash is that you're in a white room with a black ball. Mm. So it doesn't really bother me that ball is out of focus because I can still see where it is. So it's the same. Like my friend tried to get me to play Han, Heroes of New Earth, I think it was called, mm-hmm. which was a version of League of Legends, but I couldn't play it because the game is too dark and I couldn't see things. Whereas League of Legends is a very bright, vibrant game. And so part of I'm so excited for Classic is because it is such a vibrant game, and I actually know a lot of it already. So I'm not having to have this like huge learning curve because I've memorized a lot of the game.
Mm. Wiley Kid, if I can ask you, I'm interested to know if you were a console gamer at all before your car accident, and is it something that you essentially, unfortunately, had to give up, or has it not been a problem for you?
Actually, I was very much a console gamer. That's pretty much what I did before I was introduced to, World of Warcraft. I think it was in 2009. That was like my first, MMO. But prior to that, that's all I played. Like, I really loved, I enjoy, story-based games a lot, and I loved, Silent Hill and like all of those survival horror games and a lot of different platformer games like and the Zelda series and all that stuff. So, I mean, I spent most of my time when I was younger, playing those games. And then I switched over to playing a lot more of the MMOs in 2009, but I still play, console games, or I tried, it's not nearly as frequent. It has to be something that I really, really want to play, and like I kind of suffer through it a little bit with my hand for the amount of time that I can take it. It's usually like, 30 minutes here or there, to an hour, and then like I'm done. But it has to be something that I've been really waiting to play, which is unfortunate because I actually do really enjoy playing console games. But I've actually switched over if I want to play any of those like story-based games that I enjoy, or like the indie games. I've been playing a lot of stuff on Steam, when I can find games that I can like do the mapping like I do.
Yeah.
So that's how I've kind of like, I've become more of a PC gamer, I guess.
I see. Now, I presume, that you're going to be playing Classic when it comes out. Would that be the case?
Yeah. Viv, I don't think Viv would, hear that I wouldn't do it. I think he would he's gonna make me play. So that's pretty much it.
The last thing I guess I'll bring up is that, and I guess this could be a question for both of you, but is there anything at all in terms of class selection that factors in for you? I mean, when I presume it probably doesn't really matter much that, you're sitting there, you're using your mouse, any class would probably be about the same. But you mentioned that you play as a healer. Is it something that there are roles that might be easier for you only using the one hand, or you don't really get too fussed about it?
Generally, I try to pick roles that have, less of the essential, heals, or to where I can consolidate it because you only have so many buttons on your mouse. So I try to pick things that are not as complicated in how many buttons I might have to push, or if it has more than a few of the main heals or whatever, it's easy for me to use it, where occasionally I might have to click something on the action bar. I try not to do that as often as possible because it's kind of slow. But, so I would pick something based on that, what I could easily consolidate onto my mouse.
Okay. And how about you, Dave? Is there anything that comes into the equation in terms of class selection, or it just really doesn't matter?
For me, the easiest thing probably would just be a ranged DPS, or going back, because I played a rogue back in vanilla, is I know that rotation really well, because generally there's not as much relying on you as a DPS. Maybe as long as you can stay out of some basic mechanics, you can deal damage. So I'm actually doing a healer role, which I am a little bit more nervous about, because it's watching the bars go up and down, and if I miss that, there could be larger repercussions. Yeah. So I actually have a little bit of an anxiety about doing it, but I am picking a paladin, and literally they only use flash of light as their most efficient heal. So that should make things a bit easier for me. But yeah, it's definitely paladin feels like the right fit for me heal wise, just because it's a little bit more simplified. Do you find that you play older games that you already have a knack for, so you can kind of go into them and just feel like you already know how to play them, or?
I do sometimes. I'm also kind of adventurous, so I'll just try something. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I do have standard games that I will play that I've played before.
For me,
I guess it just depends.
Yeah, for me and my friends, I've only ever owned an N64, and so basically we'll play Super Smash Bros. And Mario Kart, and those are go-tos because they're really basic games that we all know how to play.
Yeah. No, I play safe like that, but I don't know. I generally like to test my limits and see what I can do, and so I'll try things out. And if it doesn't work, then that's fine, but if it does, then that's cool too. I actually wanted to ask you about, because I heard that, you were playing and you had, the legal blindness, and I was wondering, do you find, that you listen to sound cues a lot, or does that affect you at all? I was kind of curious about that, I guess.
Yeah, I really listen to sound cues. So there's a couple, Soldier of Fortune was a first-person shooter that I would play, and I would have the volume turned up, and I could hear the footsteps of people coming around, and I would just turn around and be waiting for them to come around the corner, and I'd kill them. So yeah, so there'd be there's certain games that I the sound cues are really important to me. Same with League or whatever game I'm playing. I might not even understand it fully, but subconsciously I know when I hear a particular sound that I have to basically react to it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was talking about that with Viv, and I didn't know to the extent of what your legal blindness was, if you could see it all, but I was wondering if you were you could tell what enemies you were fighting based by sound, or maybe even the areas you were in depending on music and stuff. So I was kind of just curious how that all worked.
Yeah, like I said, it's gotten worse over time. So I actually, since playing Astarias at the beginning, I haven't really gone back and visited it as my eyesight has gotten worse. So I might now rely more on sound, but it's one of those things where I'm kind of this awkward middle ground. I'm not blind, but it's not I can't see either, right? So I kind of half rely on my vision, but then I guess I lean a little bit more on my hearing, but it's not to the point where it's so bad where I'm not fully relying on my vision anymore. So it's weird.
That's really awesome, and I think it's great that you're playing and that I'm playing and all that stuff, and I think more people need to, just keep doing things that they love.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your arm and that it constantly causes you pain.
Yeah, that's probably the worst part about it. Like, I don't mind the mobility issue, but I'm literally in constant pain and stuff, so that's what kind of sucks. But I don't know, you kind of get used to it, and as you said, things become kind of like normal or whatever, and you just try to keep on trucking, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I look at the glass half full kind of deal.
Yep. That's what I try to do, and try to stay positive about it, because it doesn't help to, like, get or be negative, like, you know.
Yeah, like I've met some people that have handicaps, and they are like super negative people, and like I'm just like, it's just so hard, right? Because you feel bad for them, but it's just like very like toxic also being around them, because they literally are just like in the pits of despair. And I'm like, I can't be that person.
Yeah, same here. I have a lot of empathy for people like that. I really do, because I know how hard it is to go through life like this. And like, one of the things I really think about is how much people take for granted their health, and like not being in pain or not dealing with some kind of issue. So I just try to, like, you know, focus on that and say, you know, I mean, it could be worse, and try to, you know, be positive about the things that I have and everything, because it does, you know, good to, you know, wallow in despair about it. So.
Yeah, one of the funniest like ways I like try to explain it to people is like, you know how you feel like after you're done being sick? You're like, oh my God, I feel so amazing and I feel so great. But normally you don't think about it. But after you've been sick and you just feel like absolute garbage, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I can go out again. I can be like alive. Like, I'm like, I try to frame things like that for people. I'm like, try to picture what that's like.
That's actually a really good analogy, because that's true. It's like, you know, prior to when I got hurt, like, I didn't even think about things like that. You really do take that kind of stuff for granted. And like, you know, I was perfectly healthy. I didn't experience pain and everything like that. So to be on the other side, I mean, it's been 5 years since my accident, and I've been in constant pain since then. Like, it's never gone away. So it's just like, it's strange to think about that. And like, I don't even remember really what it's like not to. It kind of just becomes like a new normal, though.
No, I absolutely agree. And there's just one other thing that I want to add, Josh. Like, I completely agree, that like going into WoW is basically kind of getting away. Like you said, it's not escaping reality. But the fact is that when I'm out in the real world and people talk to me, a huge part of talking to someone is their facial expressions. And you don't understand that that's gone until it's gone. But it's hard for me to communicate with people sometimes, because like they will say something, but because I can't see their facial expressions, I can't fully like get what they're saying.
Yeah.
And like, it's a little subtlety thing, but it really impacts me if I'm like in a dark bar or something like that. Yeah. And I can't, like, it's not quite the same. So when I go into a game and I don't have that handicap, and I am just like a normal part of the community without that, there's like definitely a sense of relief of not being kind of like judged on that handicap and like struggling with that.
So, Josh, before I go, I just wanted to add one more thing.
Yep.
So, you know how they often say stuff about how, the internet is actually like killing, like, people being social in real life and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a way, for somebody like me who is injured and like, I can't drive, I can't go places because of this injury, so like, I have to wait for somebody to drive me places and things. Having the option to go online and be social with people like through WoW, or even through like the community that you're building, or, you know, Reddit or any of these things, is actually, you know, really nice. It gives people like me an opportunity to be social, that wouldn't necessarily have had it. So it's really nice to be able to do that. And I thought it would be, or just something that, or a different way to think about it, I guess.
No, that's a great point. I appreciate that. And I'm so glad that it definitely gives you that avenue to engage a bit more with people. That's fantastic to hear. And sorry about that. My cat was deciding to be a bit social as well. Right? As you could hear, he jumps in from time to time on the show. But thanks so much for ending with that one. I do appreciate that. It's a great point to make. And I'm so happy to hear that, obviously the game is allowing you to kind of, get involved in that way.
Well, I've known lots of people actually who it has helped, like, people with all kinds of, disabilities or like social anxiety or any number of things. Like I knew somebody who had he had a kidney transplant. He couldn't, leave the house. So like it gave him a chance to actually, talk with people and like have fun and, he didn't have to leave the house. He was able to, do it just from, his bedroom or wherever else he might do it. And it's, kind of the same for me. And, it's just a really nice option to have. So.
Definitely. And something, to be honest with you, that I hadn't even considered. So that's wonderful to hear. All right. Well, look, thanks so much to both of you for calling in today and for obviously being so open about the way in which you play the game. I really wanted to highlight on the show, I've been meaning to do this for some time, that, there are millions of us out there that play World of Warcraft. There'll be a lot of us that are going to be playing World of Warcraft Classic. And, there are people out there that play the game in different ways. And it's so nice to be able to hear, your stories. And I just wanted to thank you again, basically, for coming on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us, Josh.
Hi everyone. Did you know that the vast majority of callers that you hear on Countdown to Classic are residents of the Countdown to Classic Discord? Please do come and check us out. Outside of that, if you want to hear more from me, then follow me on Twitter at Counts2Classic with the number 2. I've also started streaming regularly, and you can find me on Twitch at Countdown to Classic. So please do come hang out and have some fun over there. If you want to call into the show, give feedback, or submit a memory lane or anger management of your own, then email me at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com. Now, let's get back to the show. And that's it for Calling Countdown for this episode. And with all those calls done now, it's time for part 1 of an epic 2-part segment looking into the history of the old gods, as voted for by the Countdown to Classic patrons, in the latest edition of That's Law Like It. In That's Law Like It, we cover off on some of the game's key lore as read from the always amazing wowpedia.com website. And today's episode, this information was put together by listener Zanzibar, who really did me an incredible favor in offering to help write this That's Law Like It segment for this week, and also hopefully to help out in future weeks. So Zanzibar, I cannot thank you enough for lightening the load on my behalf and making this episode so much easier for me to put together. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough. Now, if you're an avid listener of the show, you'll notice that some of the information contained in the following segment has been covered in earlier episodes, such as episode 10, episode 12, and episode 83, when discussing the old gods previously, or just in passing. However, for the benefit of the listeners who haven't heard those episodes, some of that information will be repeated in the context of what you're about to hear. For more information of some of the specific events the old gods have been involved in, please listen to those previous episodes. But let's get stuck into this one for now. So, while the Titans will have a whole episode dedicated to them and their history in the future, to understand why the old gods exist and where they came from, it's important to first touch upon what the Titans are and what the Pantheon is. So, without further ado, let me jump right on into the beginning of time itself. Though no one knows when or why the first Titan awoke, legends say that his name was Amun-Thul. He was alone, but he knew that others like himself must exist, and so he set out to explore myriad worlds within the Great Dark in search of other Titans. The Great Dark is the physical dark space in which there are planets and essentially the Warcraft version of outer space. It's not the twisting nether, the astral plane of the universe and the realm from which the demons originate, but this point has actually not been settled nor confirmed by lore. Anyway, back to the Titans. In time, Aman'Thul found and nurtured other world souls, rousing them from their slumber, and thus rallying them to join his noble cause. Eventually, Aman'Thul and his younger siblings formed the Pantheon. They came to realize that order was crucial to finding others of their kind, and developed certain techniques to determine whether or not the worlds they encountered contained nascent world souls. However, from the moment the universe came to be, dark spirits within the void sought to twist reality into a realm of endless torment and chaos. From the very moment the physical universe was born, the Void Lords had been watching the Titans of the Pantheon. Envious of the Titans' power, the Void Lords attempted to corrupt one of them, but the Titans remained impervious to their attempts. Instead, the Void Lords pulled their power and hurled dark parasitic horrors, later known as the Old Gods, also known as Shath-Yar in their own language, out into the universe to find and exert their influence over a Titan in its most vulnerable state, before it had awakened. Unlike the Titans, the Void Lords had no method of detecting a slumbering Titan, and therefore did not know which planets contained Titan world souls. Instead, they simply launched vast amounts of the Old Gods in the hopes that at least some of their creations would smash into a planet that contained a nascent Titan. The Old Gods began contaminating mortal worlds, twisting and corrupting them, and everything else that they touched in their blind search for a world soul. These parasitic eldritch horrors are nightmares incarnate, immense mountains of flesh and physical manifestations of the void. They grow like cancers within the worlds of the great dark beyond. Being creations of the shadowy Void Lords and physical manifestations of the void, the Old Gods are deeply intertwined with the Dark Force, and can control it directly. Many mortal followers of the Eldritch Horrors make frequent use of shadow magic, and shadow priests who derive their power from the void stray dangerously close to the domain of the Old Gods. After slamming into Azeroth from the Great Dark Beyond, the Old Gods embedded themselves in the world's surface and sent their tentacles slithering towards the planet's defenseless core and its nascent world soul. As they spread their corruptive influence across the land, two races arose from the organic matter that seeped from their blighted forms: the cunning Anraki and the resilient Akir. Later, the Akir would evolve into the insectoid races of Azeroth, the Mantid, the Karaji, and the Nerubians. The Anraki, or Faceless Ones, acted as taskmasters for the Old Gods, employing the insectoid Akir to build citadels and temples around the massive bulks of their Old God masters. The greatest of these bastions was built around Ishaj, the most powerful and wicked of the Old Gods. This burgeoning civilization was located near the center of Azeroth's largest continent, and soon the holdings of Ishaj and the other Old Gods would spread across the world, becoming known as the Black Empire. Massive sacrifices and living buildings filled with void energy were some of the distinguishing features of this shadowy domain. The rise of the Black Empire did not go unnoticed by the Elemental Lords, who had previously been the only inhabitants of Azeroth. The Elemental Lords, Neptulon the Tidehunter, Ragnaros the Fire Lord, Therazane the Stone Mother, and Al-Akir the Wind Lord, had spent the last few millennia at war with one another, vying for control of primordial Azeroth. Seeing the Old Ones as a threat to their dominion for the first time in Azeroth's history, the native spirits of the world united against a common enemy. Al-Akir and Ragnaros cooperated to create blistering firestorms, reducing the Black Empire's citadels to ash. Therazane raised jagged rock walls to corral her enemies and shatter their temple cities. Neptulon crushed the Anraki and Akir with the fury of the seas. Ultimately, however, no matter how many Anraki and Akir died, more and more would spawn from the Old Gods as putrid forms like lava from a hide. Unfortunately, there is little information of the magnitude and fury of the battles between the old gods and Azeroth's native elemental lords, but in the end, the elementals could not stand against the endless swarms of Enraki and Akir, and the old gods eventually succeeded in enslaving the elemental lords. The 4 elemental lords and the innumerable lesser elementals of fire, earth, water, and air that they controlled bolstered the ranks of the old gods' forces and joined the Enraki and the Akir in fulfilling the Old One's dark desires. Without the native spirits of the world to hinder the old gods' influence, the Black Empire's borders crept over much of the desiccated world. Perpetual twilight descended upon Azeroth, and the world spiraled into an abyss of death and suffering. The Black Empire had taken hold of Azeroth. So who were the movers and shakers of the Black Empire in primordial Azeroth? Though countless old gods were launched through the Great Dark, only 4 landed on Azeroth. They became known as Ishaj, N'Zoth, Yogg-Saron, and Cthulhu. Ishaj was the most powerful of the 4 old gods to plummet into Azeroth from the Great Dark beyond, and the greatest bastion of the Black Empire was built around its gargantuan bulk. Ishaj was the only one of the 4 old gods to be killed by the Titans, though I'll come back to this later, and its heart was imprisoned in a vault beneath the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. The story of Ishaj after the Black Empire is explored in the Mists of Pandaria expansion, so it won't be covered in this podcast. N'Zoth is said to be the weakest of the 4 old gods of Azeroth, but is notoriously elusive and largely remains a mystery. Very little is certain about N'Zoth. Most beings on Azeroth don't even know its name, much less what it looks like. Scraps of obscure lore claim that the old god was imprisoned beneath the darkest depths of the ocean for millennia beyond counting. There are also whispers that N'Zoth desires nothing more than to twist what was once noble and pure to its own inscrutable ends. It's rumored that N'Zoth took part, along with the 2 other remaining old gods, in the corruption of the Black Dragon aspect Neltharion into Deathwing, the transformation of Queen Azshara and her highborn into the Naga, and the co-creation of the Emerald Nightmare. Ultimately, most of what is known about this most insidious of beings is mere speculation. N'Zoth's story is largely shrouded in mystery until the Battle for Azeroth expansion, and again will not be covered in depth here today. Yogg-Saron is responsible for many horrors suffered by Azeroth, including being responsible for the birth of many of the mortal races of Azeroth, specifically the humans, the gnomes, and the dwarves, among others. Millennia after the fall of the Black Empire, Yogg-Saron also corrupted the World Tree Androsil, forcing its Night Elven creators to cut it down, but not before the old gods secretly managed to open a gateway into the ethereal spirit world known as the Emerald Dream, and plant the seed of corruption that would later grow into the Emerald Nightmare. Cthulhu, sometimes spelt Cthulhu with a lowercase t and pronounced Cthulhu, is the old god of madness and chaos. Cthulhu created the Karaji and resides within the city of Ahn'Qiraj in Silithus. It is an unfathomably evil entity whose pervasive power has suffused Azeroth since time immemorial. In recent years, Cthulhu freed itself. Champions of the Alliance and Horde chose not to wait for the old god to build up its strength. They invaded the city kingdom of Ahn'Qiraj, fighting countless Karaji and Silithid before finally confronting and defeating the malevolent god. Even so, it is unknown whether Azeroth has truly seen the last of Cthulhu. What has just been alluded to there, the reawakening and subsequent defeat of Cthulhu by Horde or Alliance champions, hey, that's us, has actually already been covered in depth in episode 10. More of Cthulhu's story, the War of the Shifting Sands, has also already been covered in episode 12 of this podcast, so they won't be talked about on this episode. If you are interested in what other hijinks Cthulhu has gotten up to, please do listen to those episodes. Anyway, back to it. As we've already learned, the old gods commanded the Enraki and Akir and had recently enslaved the elemental lords into their armies. Beyond these soldiers, the old gods also employed the Cathraxi as protectors within places of great importance to the old gods, and also as commanders and generals of the old gods' forces. Cathraxi, with the singular being Cathrax, are monstrous warbringers that are far larger and more resilient than the other lesser Enraki. Cathraxi possess anthropod-like features, along with great strength and brutal intellect. Their dark powers can drive even Titan-forged to madness. Even after what mortals might consider death, Cathraxi can still slowly regain their energy and return to life through external help. One of the old gods' most notable abilities is their psychic power, being able to mentally twist the thoughts of most beings and take full control of them. Entire armies of Titan-forged, the chosen soldiers of the Titans, would turn against themselves under the influence of the old gods. Even confined, their mental abilities can reach out to nearly anything around them in the form of dark whispers. Since the dawn of life on Azeroth, the old gods have been whispering to the subconsciousness of beings at the surface, subverting their thoughts and feelings and sometimes driving them to great malice, complete insanity, or both. The old whisperings urge one to do dark, terrible things. They are subtle whispers that eventually become indistinguishable from one's own thoughts. The most notorious and tragic victim of the old gods' whispers is Neltharion the Earthwarder, the once mighty dragon aspect who had been empowered by the titan Khaz'goroth with dominion over the deep places of the world. Yet not even Neltharion's great wisdom and power proved capable of breaking the grip the old whisperings had on his mind, causing the Earthwarder to eventually lose all his sanity. Neltharion renamed himself Deathwing, seeking the genocide of all non-draconic life, the enslavement of the other dragonflights, and the release of his masters. The Night Elves, Malfurion Stormrage and Varathan, momentarily heard the whisperings when they held the demon soul in their grasp. Malfurion has since stated that Ysera's noble brood had fallen victim to the old whisperings as well. This was a reference to the Emerald Nightmare. The highborn Queen Azshara, too, heard the whispers moments before what would have been her death during the Great Sundering. She accepted the Three's offer. Azshara and her highborn would be saved, but they would become servants of the old gods. They were subsequently transformed into the monstrous Naga. The most striking historic account of the old whisperings, however, is found in the ancient scrolls of lore of the Tauren tribes, kept at Elder Rise within their capital city of Thunderbluff. The legend of creation of the Taurens says that the first incidents of Tauren having committed acts of deceit, murder, or warfare were because some of their early brethren hearkened to the dark whispers from deep beneath the world. Ysera acknowledged that these whisperings originated from the old gods and that they penetrate even into the Emerald Dream. All the old gods encountered by adventurers to date have whispered to them throughout the fights, trying to convince the heroes of Azeroth to turn on their allies and give in to loneliness and despair. For all the mystical and military might the old gods command, it is perhaps these whispers and their penchant for manipulation that are their greatest ability. Old gods also have immense power over void and twilight magic, and can spread a seeping miasma from their bodies. Their corruption is strong enough to transform a pure world soul into a twisted abomination. Only awakened titans are known to be able to fully resist the corruption of the old gods. Now that the old gods had conquered Azeroth, they had little to do while waiting for the nascent world soul to be completely corrupted by their presence, so they turned their attention to one another. The old gods constantly fought against each other through infinite armies that clashed in ceaseless battle. The forces of N'Zoth, led by the Cathraxi warlord Zonoz, waged endless war against the forces of Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron, and at one point N'Zoth also lost a great battle to Ish'Arj in the land later known as the Broken Shore. However, as was so often the case, even defeat ultimately worked in N'Zoth's favour. As these battles were raging on, the Titans were still hunting more world souls to nurture into Titans. During his long and lonely journeys, the Titan known as Agramar sensed something extraordinary, the tranquil dreams of a slumbering world soul billowing across the cosmos. The Song of Life led him to a world that the Pantheon had not yet discovered, a world that they would later name Azeroth. Nestled within the world's core was one of Agramar's kin, one far more powerful than any yet encountered. The spirit was so mighty that Agramar sensed its dreams even through the din of activity that rattled across the world's surface. Yet as Agramar drew closer to Azeroth and beheld the world, horror seized him. Void energies shrouded the world's surface like a layer of diseased flesh. From the ruined landscape rose the old gods and their black empire. Miraculously, the nascent Titan spirit remained uncorrupted, but Agramar knew it was only a matter of time before it succumbed to the void. Agramar sought counsel with the rest of the Pantheon, informing them of his discovery. Agramar urged the other Titans to take action with all due haste before Azeroth was lost forever. Azeroth was one of them, a lost and vulnerable member of their family. The Pantheon could not abandon their own sibling to the clutches of the Void Lords, and they unanimously agreed to save Azeroth, no matter the cost. Agramar formulated a bold plan of attack. All members of the Pantheon would travel to Azeroth and purge the Black Empire that had claimed it. They would not, however, take action directly. Due to their colossal forms, Agramar feared the Pantheon would irreparably damage or even kill the World Soul. Instead, he proposed creating mighty constructs to act as the Pantheon's hands and prosecute their will against the Black Empire. Under the guidance of the great forger, Khaz'goroth, the Pantheon crafted an army of enormous servants from the crust of Azeroth itself, the Aesir and the Vanir. The Aesir were fashioned from metal, and they would command the powers of storm. The Vanir were formed from stone, and they would hold sway over the earth. Collectively, these mighty creatures would be known as the Titan Forged. The members of the Pantheon imbued a number of their servants with their specific likeness and powers to lead the rest of the Titan Forged. These empowered beings were called Keepers. Though they would develop their own personalities in time, they would forever after bear the mark and abilities of their makers. Aman'Thul gifted some of his vast abilities to High Keeper Ra and Keeper Odin. Khaz'goroth bestowed his mastery over the earth and forging to Keeper Arcadus. Golganath granted Keepers Thorim and Hodir dominion over the storms and skies. Ionar gave Keeper Freyja command over Azeroth's flora and fauna. Norgannon lent a portion of his intellect and mastery of magic to Keepers Loken and Mimiron. Finally, Agramar imparted his strength and courage to Keeper Tyr, who would become the greatest warrior of the Titan Forged. With this new army molded from the world's crust, the Pantheon went to war. The time to shatter the Black Empire and free Azeroth from its malign influence had come. Upon arriving on Azeroth, the Titans encountered the Elementals, who vowed to drive the Pantheon back in the name of their Dark Masters. The Titan Forged were given their first taste of battle, with massive success, against the Elementals of Azeroth. To subdue the vanquished Elementals, the Keepers created the Elemental Plane as a prison realm of sorts to house them. The plane consists of 4 interlinked regions existing within a pocket dimension, each representing one of the major elements. Skywall for air, Deepholm for earth, the Abyssal Maw for water, and the Firelands for fire. To keep Azeroth safe from these threats, the Titans banished the savage elementals here, where the ceaseless war they would go on to rage could not affect the planet itself. As one, the Keepers turned their righteous gaze on the heart of the Black Empire, the sprawling city built around the old god Ishaj. By toppling the bastion on Azeroth, the Keepers believed they could crush their enemies in one swift stroke. The Keepers and their allies battled their way towards the mountainous form of Ishaj, who was more powerful than they expected. It poisoned the minds of the Titan Forge, drawing out their fears and darkening their thoughts. The Pantheon grew concerned that the old god would overwhelm their servants. Despite the risk of harming the world, they decided to take direct action. Aman'Thul himself reached down through Azeroth's stormy skies and took hold of Ish'Arge's writhing body. With a heave of his mighty arm, he tore the old god from the crust of the world. In that moment, Ish'Arge's bulk was ripped apart. The immensity of the old god's death rattle shattered mountaintops and obliterated hundreds of Titan forged where they stood. Ish'Arge was dead, but its tendrils had bored more deeply through Azeroth than Aman'Thul had ever imagined. In excising the old gods from the world, Ish'Arge was instantly ripped apart, but in the wake of its death, the lifeblood of Azeroth's world soul rushed to the surface in a great wound later known as the Well of Eternity. Aman'Thul had ripped a wound in Azeroth's surface. Volatile arcane energies erupted from the scar and rolled out across the world. Horrified by this turn of events, the Pantheon realized that they could not risk killing the other old gods in such a manner. The malignant creatures had embedded themselves so deep into the world that tearing them out would destroy Azeroth itself. The Pantheon knew that the only course of action was to imprison the old gods where they lay and contain the evil forever. It would be a difficult task, but it would be possible with the aid of the Keepers. At the Pantheon's behest, the Titan Forge devised a plan to shatter the last vestiges of the Black Empire. They would battle each of the old gods directly. Once they had weakened the creatures, Arcadus would create subterranean chambers to contain them. Mimiron would then fashion colossal machineries to lock the old gods in place. When this work was done, Loken would imbue each prison with a great enchantment that would neutralize the old gods as evil. The campaign of the Titan Forge to contain the remaining three was long and brutal, but eventually they succeeded in containing the old ones below the surface of the world. Cthulhu was bound within the great fortress of Ahn'Qiraj, located closely to the Titan Forge stronghold of Uldum, and N'Zoth was imprisoned in a similar way, though it's not known exactly where, possibly deep below Azeroth's oceans. Yogg-Saron was the last old god to be imprisoned, even unleashing its enormous Cathraxi generals in an attempt to halt the advance of the Titan Forge, but eventually Yogg-Saron was sealed away within the depths of Ulduar, in the far northern reaches of the infant world, and had 6 watchers assigned to it which served as wardens for its near-eternal imprisonment. The Titanic Watchers known as Loken, Thorim, Hodir, Tyr, Mimiron, and Freya. With the fall of the Black Empire, the imprisonment of the 3 remaining old gods, and the elemental's departure to the elemental plane, nature calmed, and the world settled into a peaceful harmony. And as we say in Australia, we might pull up stumps there for the time being with That's Law Like It. Look for the thrilling conclusion to that in episode number 91 in a couple of weeks' time, as that's just half of the epic, amazing job that Zanzibar did in putting together that piece for me. And just a reminder, that's a fan chipping in and working for the show out of the kindness of his own heart. So please do thank Zanzibar in the Discord for that colossal effort. But just before I let you all go, now don't have a heart attack as I don't have any news, but just a quick note about the classic beta that we're all hoping for soon. I've been looking to the distance, smelling the wind, rubbing dirt between my fingers and trying to track this thing down and figure out exactly when it may be coming, as it's now been almost 3 months since our last bit of news at BlizzCon. Now that's fine, I'm not saying we have to have an update or there will be blood or anything like that, but I've just been reading a few things here and there, and please do realize I have absolutely zero inside information, but just getting the pulse of multiple Discords, tweets and whatnot, I'm thinking we're likely to get some news in the next 2 weeks. I'm not breaking ground there given the timing since the last piece of news, but I've just got a funny feeling that alpha or beta chat is right around the corner and perhaps closer than we all think. And if that is indeed the case, then of course we'll be talking all about it here on Countdown to Classic. So fingers crossed. But just before I let you go, it's time for some thank yous, and a big thank you as always to patrons Connor C, Damien A, Eric L, Herbert, John HC, Jamie S, Michael H, Minoru, Randall H, Rarebit, Rick S, Tim B, Tim S, and Zudamos. And of course, the very dedicated patrons of Countdown to Classic. An extra special shout out and thank you from the bottom of my heart to the following people: Billy C, Firespittin' Kitten, Flosy B, Carl W, Nick B, Palfurus, Romani, Tsunami, The Anton, Wilson Ma, and Velarco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. I love engaging with you all over at the Discord. I really do feel like I'm getting to know some of you so much better, and it's so nice to become friends with so many of you there. And again, I can assure you the Countdown to Classic would not be on the air as we speak if these people were not supporting the show in the way that they are. So, do say thank you when and where you can. But that's it for today. Happy Australia Day, everyone, on January 26th. I shall see you all next time.